Good to have you here, 3 and Out on this Tuesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, and we've got plenty to get to here on the show. Mike Hollis, former Pro Bowl Jaguars kicker, will join us here on the program. All of the NFL playoff games this weekend coming down to the final play, and 3 of those off of the leg of a kicker. So we'll talk to Mike Hollis about that coming up in just a little bit. Of course, the NFL's got all kind of news. Who's retiring, who maybe isn't retiring, who's thinking about retiring. We'll get to that. We'll also hear from Kylie McDaniel, ESPN Baseball Insider. Of course, the baseball labor talks going on as we speak. Maybe have an update this afternoon, and we hope to get that update from Kylie McDaniel. Also, baseball, kind of funny, they're going through this, BJ and Ben, and we're expected to have the latest Hall of Fame class announced coming up at 4 o'clock. So a little bit of everything going on in and around the baseball world, but baseball labor negotiations ongoing, of course. Spring training usually set to begin with pitchers and catchers reporting around Valentine's Day. Of course, there is no deal at this point, but a little bit of progress potentially yesterday as the sides met for the first time since December 2nd. From Jeff Passan, ESPN.com, in the face-to-face meeting, which lasted about 2 hours, the union offered a broad proposal in which it dropped its request for age-based free agency and significantly cut the amount of revenue sharing it asked the league to funnel away from small market teams, according to sources. So apparently there's some room for negotiation there. I think there's other things that they're trying to do with the players would like, and that is to bump the average salary up for mid-level players. Ben, I think people talk about that all the time, is you have the guys at the top that everybody knows, and you can do that in any league. You got your Aaron Rodgers, your Tom Brady's, guys like that who are making a lot of the money. You got your guys who are fresh into the game on rookie deals, and then you have your mid-level guys who are the guys that make up the bulk of your league, probably not overly famous outside of the city they play in, and don't really make a bulk of the money. And since the last collective bargaining agreement, the union has said the average mid-level player salary has gone from $11 million down to $3 million a season. That's a significant drop. And you would say, well, what's the difference? Guys are getting $50 million, and you can extend guys on rookie deals, and you could become the Miami Marlins if you want to, which is we'll pay, and then when it comes time, anybody that costs any kind of money will let go, and we'll bring up a bunch of dudes on rookie deals and have very little payroll. And I think that is a problem for Major League Baseball as they see it, because they're not the only one. Anytime you hit rebuild, if you are a mid-level guy that wants any kind of money, sorry, man, we're not going to. We may have a star that we give money to sell some tickets. Everybody else is going to be on a rookie deal while we rebuild this thing. And I think that's what they're trying to look out for, the guys in the middle who used to get the 1 and 2 year deals for $20 million are now getting a 1 and 2 year deal worth about $8 million total. And they've really seen that kind of mid-level stuff come down. That's one sticking point. Obviously, years to get to free agency is another one. And so they do have some things to work out, but maybe some signs of at least progress that I think both sides understand a work stoppage would not go over well for the sport.
For everybody who has a problem with the players versus the owners, you have a problem with certain players when it comes to the owners. And I know BJ, something we talked about, people are more favorable when it comes to the owners, but this is about priorities. This is about being able to shift priorities and what the priority. Kevin says something that I think people need to not let leave their mind. The bulk of every league is the mid-tier players. That is the bulk of it. The guys that are not getting endorsement deals, who don't have national commercials. Look, I was a second-round pick, and I thank God for that every single day. I was able to re-sign with a team after my 4th year. But the more I was on the roster, the more I realized this thing is not fair across the board. A guy who doesn't start or who is not a big-name player's contribution is not less of those guys who get more opportunities. The reason why baseball goes on is because the Mike Trouts of the world, when they miss games, guess what? You don't even really feel it because the Angels are still going to run out there. But negotiations are more than just, quote, millionaires versus billionaires. This is about former players. This is about how do you take care of the former players when they're no longer playing. There's a lot. The business of baseball is what's going on now. BJ, think about it. I don't know how many players it is in Major League Baseball, but 4 players and lawyers are at the negotiating table against what? 30 owners? think about how much of a disadvantage if every other owner came in with their representation versus 4 players and some lawyers. I'm just saying it's not in favor of the players, and it's always going to come down to the players who make up the league, that be the mid-tier or lower tier players. So I think it's more the perception of it doesn't look good, and I know you don't want to have a work stoppage, but think about it. But guess who doesn't care if you have a work stoppage? The $50 million guys. They don't care if you got a work stoppage. They still get the money. Guess who can ill afford to do it? The mid-tier. So the people who need the money the most, they don't want a work stoppage. Problem is they're not at the negotiating table. So we'll see what happens.
Well, and news all over the place, Kevin, including as we speak, some recent developments.
Yeah, Jeff Passan said, hey, the talks for today are over. Here's some of the things that happened, and Ben will probably appreciate some of this in terms of negotiations. In a couple of tweets here, I'll read what he said. MLB agreed to accept parameters of a pre-arbitration bonus pool for top 30 in WAR. Basically, your best young players can get a little bit more money there. MLBPA is seeking, this is the players, seeking $105 million in that pool. The league, and this is to give to guys pre-arbitration, so very young players who are good. MLB Player Association wants $105 million in that pool. The league offered 10. Okay, you're not close on that. You've got some room, but again, what in any negotiation, whether you're buying a house or whatever, hey, I'm selling a house. I'm going to put out I want above market value. And then people trying to buy it are going to say, hey, they said he wants 200 for this house. Let's throw out an offer of 175. They'll laugh at it. We'll laugh at theirs, and we'll meet somewhere down the road and try to get this thing done. So I think that's at least a starting point, even as absurd as that difference may be. MLB offered the players a raise in the minimum salary to $615,000. Again, you're talking about veteran minimum, guys you probably don't hear a whole lot of, way down to bench players, rookies who are guys just coming off the rookie deal who haven't had a great 615. Players want $775,000 as the minimum. Again, you're not that far off. My guess is maybe you meet at 675, 700, somewhere in there, and you potentially move forward. And MLB withdrew their offer to change how arbitration works. So according to Jeff Passan, there's not going to be a deal. There never was going to be a deal, but you're sitting at the table. He says his takeaway in a tweet, a pre-arbitration bonus pool gets the best young players paid more. Players wanted it, and it's a good thing for them. Players are laughing at the $10 million offer. It's far too low. Negotiations will change that. So there's some of the things coming out of the negotiations today there with the MLB and the union trying to obviously get this thing done.
Well, obviously there is a lot to discuss. I mean, this has not been, you were telling us this in the show meeting, when you talk about a players association negotiating a new contract, it's not just, well, what percentage of the revenue are they getting? What percentage of the revenue are we getting? It's a very complex, multifaceted, dynamic set of parameters that not only applies to current players, but future players as well. But I wanted to ask you guys this just gut, because I'm kind of eyes wide open on this, and I've always had sort of a pessimistic feeling about baseball starting on time. I believe we're about, 2 weeks away from
pitchers and catchers reporting,
from when spring training would normally. To me, I think most fans, if you miss a couple of weeks of spring training, that doesn't really register. I think that's okay. Now, maybe that has an impact on certain players at the major league level, but in terms of the blowback or the feedback from the fan base, if you miss 10 days, 14 days of spring training into the day, I don't think anyone cares. Does this feel like a compromise that's emerging so that baseball starts on time, or is it too early to have a guess on that front?
I think it's too early to guess on that. I think obviously baseball would like to start on time. I mean, spring training.
Yeah, I don't mean with spring training. I mean opening day. By
and large, I think, again, you say people don't care about that. Who does care about it? All those towns in Florida who get people to come and watch games and buy hotels and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
They like having spring training, but you're probably your major league player, your Freddie Freemans, your Ozzie Albies, guys like that. Give me 2.5 weeks of solid baseball, and by solid baseball, now obviously think about how they do it now. Hey, you come in. All right, Ozzie, it's spring training game number 1. You'll get 2 at-bats. Go hit the golf course. It's fine. Come again, get some field work, some drill work. Give them a couple weeks of drill work. Give them a couple of weeks of games where, again, and when I say games, I'm talking about probably Freddie Freeman staying in the whole game, 4 or 5 at-bats a night. They could be ready in a couple of weeks. The pitchers are what you have more concern about as far as getting stretched out, but I think, again, a 26-man roster, which was put out there, I think some of that stuff you'll see bargained in. I think the DH is something, and to me, that seems like something that both sides will give in on the DH. It just, hey, we'll pay a guy to give us more offense, generate more runs, more viewers, more money, whatever. Another reason to come to the ballpark. So I think those are things that will be negotiated out relatively easy. This is the quote, then boring stuff that people look at and go, oh, come on. But as you said, very important to the league. You say, oh, come on, you're one saying 615, one saying 775. I mean, if I'm on a minimum deal, that's a big difference. That's $150,000. You know, that's a big difference to a guy who's on a minimum deal. So, those are some of the meat and potatoes. But as you said, it's up to the league to look out for the mid-level guys, for your veteran minimum guys who have been in the league 6, 7, 8 years, who aren't going to make the 30, 40, $50 million contract that we see in the news all the time.
Yeah, and this. I mean, you got to be able to play hardball, and this is something that I really didn't understand when I was in the National Football League. Is I was a football player by trade, and that's what I did the best. I didn't understand what happens away from the field, and the problem is that's what's going on now. You're being manipulated by what you do not know. Look how big of a difference it is. Now, this is what the owners are saying. Okay. The owners are already thinking in the future, in the present. They say, if we give them 7-75 in 2022, the next time they come back around, that's the starting point. They got to start at 7-75. So I do agree that sometimes these players associations, they usually just take it what these owners give them, unless the players really, really like show a lot of concern. Look, I'm telling you, $600,000 is a lot of money. $600,000 for a person that's paying 100 and something games before taxes. When the one guy, and look, and I am not mad at Trout, and Harper and those guys, but I'm scratching and clawing for what he makes in a game. That's one game check for him, depending on how much he's making, and that's what I'm making for the year. Because the guys, look, Kevin, you always telling me when you talk about like minor league baseball, you're fighting for those guys that get called up. That spend their whole career. I think
that's the other thing you don't think about is like you get called up from the minor leagues, right. And this is again in the weeds baseball stuff, but you get called up in June and you're up for 2 weeks. You get paid the major league minimum for 2 weeks. So whatever 162nd of 615 or 775 is, that's what you get paid. So you don't think those guys, I wish it was 775, make a little bit more money for my 2 weeks in the big leagues. And so I do think that's what guys look at and say, it's not just calling the guy up in August to say, hey, I need you on the roster for a month while this guy gets healthy. If you're on a minimum deal coming up out of the minor leagues, that's what you're getting. 615, 1 divided by 162. So 1/162nd every single day you're on the roster out of that 615 is what you're going to get. And I think that's what they're wanting to see is guys like that when they get to the big leagues get compensated. And get compensated in a big way for, again, minor league baseball. They've done a lot to reform that, so guys get paid a little more, have a little better standard of living. And I think now they're trying to work to make sure that continues at the big league level. And again, to me, I don't mind the minimum going up. I wish there was more of a rule in place like Major League Baseball, like the NFL has. I don't care about a salary cap, but I do think if you're going to own a major league franchise, there should be a minimum threshold with which you have to put out there to field a competitive team. Right, I don't think we can be giving, Max Scherzer $40 million and guys like that $40-50 million, and there are franchises that won't spend that much on 26 players like that. You don't have a competitive. Think about this. Let's put it in NFL terms. Let's say the Kansas City Chiefs spent $200 million or let's say they gave Patrick Mahomes $50 million, which they may be getting close to doing anyway. Pat Mahomes makes $50 million. And the Jacksonville Jaguars' entire $50 million roster gets paid $60 million. You don't have a competitive league at that point, right? I mean, you just don't. So I think that's what you're seeing in Major League Baseball, where you saw the Orioles lost 115 some odd games. Well, they had the lowest payroll in baseball. They weren't trying financially to go out and compete and win ball games. And I think if I'm baseball, I'd say, look, let's pay the mid-level guys. And the way we do that is make some of these teams quit being on the cheap and have a minimum that you need to spend. I'm not saying you got to spend $180 million and be like the Yankees and Red Sox, but you can't spend 30.
No, it's a good point. It's a good point. There are complex issues where there are a lot of details to address, but I'm asking you this, going back to kind of we're 2 weeks away from spring training talk. There is a timeline here, given that there is not a current agreement and you are at least getting into the time of the year where folks start thinking about baseball and looking ahead to opening day. Is there pressure to have whatever needs to be done by opening day, and how dramatic is that pressure?
Yes, there's pressure. I think the question is, do the people in the room realize that and feel that? Did they feel it during COVID when everybody's like, just go play? There's no sports. You're missing an opportunity to put your product out there when nobody else is playing, and people are being told they're not essential. They need to stay home, and y'all can't figure out how to work for 60 days in an environment to get it done. Like, I think some of that may have subsided from that extreme scenario, but I do think there's a lot of people that'll be like, look, there's a lot going on, man. You got to figure this out. And because you don't feel the pressure, don't think that there's not pressure for every lost day that's out there for the game. And again, because people, especially in today's day and age, they're very fickle. Hey, any day that I'm not there to be put in the news or in front of somebody is a day they can look to do something else, right? Any day that that's the whole point of like social media and influence. Like, hey, I want you to come back and view my content day after day. Well, if you stop doing it, well, I'll just go find somebody else. If you stop putting out a product, I mean, diehard baseball fans will love you, but casual fans will say, well, what's this? What's this going on over here? I kind of got into that now. Kind of got into that. And you have to win them back all over again. And that's not something I think you want to have to constantly keep doing at the end of the day. We got more to come here on 3 and Out. Kylie McDaniel will join us in the final hour. ESPN Baseball Insider will get the latest from him on that. Also, Mike Hollis, former Pro Bowler for the Jacksonville Jaguars, former kicker. He will join us in about 20 minutes here on the show after 3 of the 4 games came down to the leg of those very field goal kickers. It is 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. It is 3 and Out. Glad you're with us on this on this Tuesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. NFL playoffs down 2-4. Then there were 4 left remaining after just a wild playoff weekend. And I know you guys touched on it a lot yesterday with all 4 games coming down to the last play of the ball game. 3 of those off the legs of the kicker. And we'll talk to Mike Hollis, former Jags Pro Bowl kicker, about that coming up in just a little bit. But certainly every team but one lost at home as well. Only the Chiefs were able to survive, and that just barely at the end of the day. So you look at the 4 teams left, maybe you say we have 3 of the 4 are the most unlikely to be there after Brady and Aaron Rodgers go by the wayside. So how do you view these teams that are left in this playoffs?
In terms of favorites?
Yeah, in terms of how do you kind of power rank what's left? Because 3 of these teams, certainly I don't think anybody saw the Bengals still lasting around. The Rams, people were saying, okay, Matt Stafford, can he win a playoff game? Okay, he did, but now he's got to go through the GOAT. Can they do it? And they almost didn't. They almost choked that one away. The 49ers going in sub-zero, Lambeau Field, that just doesn't happen. And yet here they still are.
I think for me, it lines up pretty easily. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to go this way. I don't know if we were going to address last week, but I went 0 for 4 on my playoff picks. I went 0 for 4. And look, in some ways, I'm kind of proud of that because you have to try to do that. But I think for me, Kansas City, the number 1 team, listen, where's the weakness? If you want to say relative weaknesses defensively, we still have Tyrann Mathieu and Chris Jones. And, I mean, you still have just guys that can wreck games. And Mathieu, remember, missed the vast majority of that game over the weekend as he had the concussion protocol he entered early in the game. So I think Kansas City, I would go LA too. I think even though not long ago we were talking about Matt Stafford trying to win that first playoff game, this is still a loaded roster. I mean, in terms of just how many guys are all pros, Pro Bowlers, this might be the best roster in the league. When you look at what unit has a question mark. I mean, there's a star at every single unit on the field. I mean, defensively, it's ridiculous. Aaron Donald, Von Miller, Jalen Ram. I mean, it's absurd. And then you're talking about Cooper Kupp just had one of the best seasons ever. A great offensive line, Matt Stafford, Odell. I mean, it's ridiculous. 3, I'll go Cincinnati. I do think this team continues to impress each week and kind of show you a little more about who they are and what they're capable of. I don't know how you doubt Joe Burrow at this point. I mean, we keep doing it, and he keeps looking and laughing and saying, okay, what's next? Not only why not us, it is us, and they're living up to it. And then San Francisco, I'll put 4, but they've earned where they are. I mean, you go to Lambeau and you have that performance. I do wonder in terms of compared to the other teams, right? Like if you talk about the Chiefs, everybody knows the playmakers. You talk about the Bengals, even everybody knows Burrow and Chase. And if you talk about the Rams, there are countless stars. Can the average football fan name 3 or 4 players for the 49ers? I mean, you know about Jimmy G. Debo, right?
Whoa.
But I mean, outside of that, but this coaching staff has done an incredible job. Shanahan, D'Amico Ryans, a remarkable job at defensive coordinator. So I'll go Bengals, I'll go Chiefs, Rams, Bengals, 49ers.
Wow, man. I mean, when you think about these, the 4 teams left, I mean, BJ, I mean, everything you said about, Kansas City is Kansas City. They're the usual suspect. 4 years. The last 4 years they've been representing the AFC in the Nfc Championship Game, so I'm not going to pick anybody over them. My number 2, though, is Cincinnati. Because the thing about it is sometimes it's good when you are an overachiever early in your life because you don't take on the woes of what Cincinnati used to be. Joe Burrow, like, look, man, I don't want to hear about what they haven't done. Didn't we win the only playoff game on the road ever in the history of Cincinnati? Okay, didn't we go on the road against the number 1 seed Titans, 9 sacks given up, and we still win? Same Joe Burrow. Last time we saw him in college, went undefeated, number 1 overall pick. So I think the thing about Cincinnati is they expected to be here. They said a year removed from Joe Burrow being hurt, Jamar Chase and Higgins and mixing those guys are getting it done. Now, my number 3, though, is the Rams. My goodness. I think sometimes when you put a guy like Odell, who people thought he was done in Cleveland, put a guy like Matthew Stafford, got him up out of the Motor City. I got him out there, to the City of Angels. You see what happens when you and then you talk about Von Miller. Now, I don't think Von Miller got that much left in the tank, but he showed you what can happen in key moments because he made some key plays. Odell Beckham Jr. had the best. He graded out the best out of all the wide receivers in last week's game. You still got Jalen Ramsey. You still got Aaron Donald. You know, you got guys like Sony Michel. So I do go with those Rams number 3. And obviously, San Francisco, they have to do more with less. Jimmy Garoppolo, to me, is the worst quarterback left in these playoffs. Now, he's 4 out of 4. But number 4 of 4, whatever. But when you think about the fact that BJ, Kevin, he's been here before. And he's trying to be able to say, look, I'm not going to be a 49er moving forward. Y'all giving me way more time and way more money than you probably should. But I want to get back to and could it be the rematch of, oh my God, what if he does it against the same team? He couldn't do it against the first time Kansas City. But I do think that the most dangerous team left to me is Cincinnati, because BJ, Kevin, y'all know every time we see him, we like Cincinnati, AFC Championship game, second-year quarterback, first-year wide receiver, T. Higgins in his second year. It's like, what is going on? And BJ, you talking about I can't name no players. I know you was doing it before the show. If Cincinnati whole defense was walking through the mall of Cincinnati, they'd be like, what you guys doing? You got a band or something? What y'all group? Y'all kind of big? Because they don't know who they are. But to me, that's what makes teams good, right? And I will say this: there's something to say about a guy like Matthew Stafford. When everything was on him in Detroit, now he's in L.A. Do anybody know Matthew Stafford in L.A. for real? No. That go LeBron walking right there, right? That go Carmelo. Don't nobody know. They were like, who's that guy? That's Matthew Stafford. He plays for who? The Rams. Who is that? They find a way to get it done, and they're trying to be able to hold it. So yes, I'm gonna say Kansas City, Cincinnati, them Rams, and the 49ers. But shout out to DeMeco Ryans, who was doing about as good a job as you held Aaron Rodgers, to under 20 points, and you got that dub. So shout out to DeMeco Ryans, but shout out to them Cincinnati boys for trying to start a new tradition up there in Cincinnati.
Yeah, going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. I think most people would put the Chiefs as a pretty nice favorite here. Again, it could be a nice showdown with Joe Burrow this weekend, but I would imagine no matter who they line up against, the Chiefs would be the favorite to win it out. I mean, you have Brady out, Rodgers out, the Tennessee Titans, who are perceived at least to be the number 1 seed, out. I mean, it kind of opened the way up for Pat Mahomes. Would that be a knock against him if he can't go through and get to the Super Bowl and win it here, given some of the big dogs, if you will, that have been knocked out of the way for the Kansas City Chiefs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that'd probably be unfair. I mean, I understand what you're saying. Hey, you have a chance with 2 wins to have another title, and there's no Brady, there's no Rodgers, but you have great teams still left. Cincinnati, if you're criticizing Cincinnati, your only criticism can be from the history of the organization. I mean, this team just went to the number 1 seed, fresh off a bye with their star player back, and won. So I think Pat Mahomes knows he's got to earn it. I think in terms of, favorites, what would the line be? I think a Kansas City, LA line, especially with the Super Bowl being in LA Stadium, would be pretty close. Just the star power all over the field. But yes, I agree. I think we all agree the Chiefs at this point, the favorite.
At the end of the day, I'm very, very, very impressed with the last 4 teams standing, because the thing about the Chiefs is, BJ and Kevin, y'all know this, as soon as the Chiefs show any sign of weakness, people are like, oh, here go the Chiefs. They're not, they ain't got it this year. No, you got Patrick Mahomes, you got Travis Kelce, you got Tyreek Hill. You got a bunch of guys. The thing about Cincinnati, though, I was like, Joe Burrow's mentality is starting to resonate throughout the team. Jamar Chase is the only rookie in NFL history to have back-to-back 100 100-yard receiving games in the playoffs. Everybody got their own built-in storylines. Matthew Stafford, a new face in a new place. Here we are, NFC Championship game. Jalen Ramsey get a chance. I remember Jalen Ramsey. BJ was a part. He did everything he could to get up out of Jacksonville, and it seems to be working. Von Miller getting traded halfway during the season. But then you talk about San Francisco, Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, Jimmy Garoppolo, Debo, George Kittle. I just think that sometimes, we write teams off. We will see what happens, but I do think the party crashes are them Cincinnati, them nasty natty boys. Shout out to my homie Deshaun Wynn. I know Cincinnati boy, they call it the nasty natty. No, it's the nasty Nash, Deshaun. I had to tell you that we play. But no, I'm looking forward to it, BJ. But this is the thing. Josh Allen showed what happened when you got a good quarterback. Joe Burrow, can he put up those type of numbers against Kansas City, especially if they down Tyrann Mathieu? It might be a good one.
Going to be interesting to watch, certainly coming up this weekend. We've got more to come. Mike Hollis, former Jacksonville Jaguar Pro Bowl kicker, will join us when we return here on 3 and Out, Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you along here, 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. NFL playoffs, and then they were 4, but a wild weekend of NFL football for you this past weekend, all coming down to the last play. 3 kickers sending their teams on to the next round. And joining us here on the program, former Pro Bowler, Jaguars kicker, the original Jaguars kicker, Mike Hollis, joining us here on 3 and Out. Mike, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. How you guys been?
Doing fantastic. And you get in those situations over the weekend where so much is made about offense. I know when the early game Saturday was a lot of field goals being kicked back and forth, and ultimately 3 of the 4 games come down to putting your faith in the guy kicking the football. What's it like knowing, hey, the team, because at the start of those drives, obviously the goal is, hey, get us in field goal range, and we're going to lock this thing up and go to the next round.
Well, it is, it's part of the game. Special teams is a third of the game itself. You don't hear a lot about special teams, but we typically score the most points. I led the league I led the whole NFL in scoring in 1997, and I kicked a lot of field goals that year, of course, and helped my team win a lot of games. So, it's when you're in that situation as a kicker, the trick is really not to put any more pressure on yourself. As a kicker, your job is really literally the same. I mean, the intensity is stepped up. The other players in the field, they're running probably a little faster or hard, pushing it a little harder. They're 100%. They're pushing the limits a little bit more than they would normally. That's just the playoff atmosphere. But for a kicker, it's the same. We want to actually be more relaxed. We want to take less pressure or take more pressure off of ourselves and just kind of do the same things we've been doing. There's no reason to change a thing at all as a kicker.
You talk about that third aspect of the game, special teams. It seems like once you get into the playoffs or when you're in a big game, special teams matters even more, whether it was the kicks and someone like Evan McPherson for Cincinnati basically scoring all the team's points, or San Francisco with the blocks. Does special teams have a way of mattering even more when there's more on the line?
I think so. I think that, when it comes to the playoff atmosphere, the X's and O's with regards to offense and defense and what they're coming up with as far as a game plan, they might, amplify a little bit as well. But special teams is where every team's looking for an advantage. And so if they can find an advantage somewhere in special teams or the typical thing is that, teams don't spend too much time on special teams. So let's just try to take advantage of certain players or so that aren't really starters. They're guys that are on the team, but they're on the team just for special teams. But it is a mindset where you're always trying to out scheme the other team, and in special teams they take advantage of certain situations they see on film, and obviously every play counts, and special teams does step up in the playoffs. And I'm glad these kickers are doing so well in winning games, because it puts more importance on that aspect of the game.
Mike, when you think about your approach to the game in general, like the game is going on all the time. Obviously, you're looking at down and distance and seeing if they are in field goal range. How does your routine, whether it's postseason or regular season, kind of remain the same? Because you always have to be on the sideline getting warmed up. What is your routine, and how do you keep your, the pressure of the game kind of at ease? That way it doesn't get too high and too low for you.
Well, like you said, you change nothing. And again, with regard to the pressure that you just mentioned, you change nothing. Every kick is important, and if you make any kick any more important than the last one or the first one of the game or whichever kick you're kicking, because they're all the same, you as a kicker have to treat it as the same. You can't think about what it's going to do as far as the outcome of the game, because the last kick is just important as the first kick, because the first kick you made in that game, the first field goal that you kicked, had a lot to do with where you are right now at the end of the game, kicking the game-winning kick. So they're all important. It's really up to the kicker to kind of simplify the process and more or less dumb it down and take a lot of pressure off himself. Just doing the same routine. Just don't think about the consequences. In other words, just do what you've done a million times over and over again.
And Mike, you talk about that. We're talking with Mike Hollis, former Jacksonville Jaguars place kicker. You talk about don't think about the consequence. A couple of these guys had to trot out there. I think the Green Bay game, it was snowing with the game on the line. You were obviously used to kicking in Jacksonville. How much does that change your approach when the ground's hard, it's snowing? What is that kind of mindset like? I know you try to make it the same, but it's not every day there's a snowstorm happening while you're trying to kick your team to the next round.
That is a true point. The biggest thing for me, that as a kicker kicks a ball in cold weather situations, you just know as a kicker the ball's not going to travel as far as it typically would if it was a lot warmer, and the balls typically fly in warmer climates. Well, that's one thing. So there's a limit to how far maybe you can kick that specific day in the snow. The biggest concern for me as a kicker would be the footing. I've played on fields where part of the field, has kind of, well, they say the whole field had a heating system, and the snow and the ice would never form, but there are parts on the field that are more frozen, and other parts that are not. So if you get that unlucky spot on the last play before you start trotting out in the field for the field goal, and you're putting your foot down, showing your holder where you want the ball, and you notice the ground is frozen when it wasn't supposed to be, then you got issues. So yeah, the field surface, the footing is the biggest concern for kickers. I would think. We know that the ball is just not going to travel as far. You just got to hit it solid, make it a good contact ball, and hope it goes through. Obviously, but the footing is something that would scare a lot of kickers if you're not, if you're thrown for a surprise when the ground's actually frozen and you weren't really ready for it.
A quarterback can throw an interception, still have a great game. Wide receiver can drop a couple of passes, still have a great game. Defensive player can miss a tackle, still have a great game. It feels like for kickers, at least from the outside looking in, the expectation is perfection. How do you operate in an environment where that is seemingly the standard?
Well, that's just the nature of the position. Somebody's got to do it. That's the thing is, you work hard week in and week out, and you prepare, for, games and situations and, opportunities to kick the football and, do your job. The times when, you got to realize that field goal operation is 1.3 seconds or less, or somewhere around there. That's very quick. And plus you also have, the snapper and the holder. Obviously, you're kicking a ball that's held by the holder. But if those guys are off or something's off within that 1.3 seconds, you have to adjust sometimes. And it's just a matter of improvising if you have to, and just being a professional about the situation, and just hoping for a normal routine. It is the expectation level for kickers, especially in the NFL at that level, especially these days in the NFL. Those guys are expected to make 100% of their kicks. Clearly, we know that that's not always going to happen, but you as a kicker, that's your goal, is to be 100% every game, each week. And, sometimes things happen and it just doesn't work out real well. And you just move on and you learn from, the situations, and just do the best you can. And if you're showing your teammates that you're working hard and you are, showing a lot of effort and doing a lot of things for your team, they respect you, make or miss, they still love you as a teammate. And, hopefully they won't treat you too bad after a miss. But yeah, they're all important. And, so, like I said, somebody's got to do it.
Micah, Evan Money McPherson, rookie kicker for the Cincinnati Bengals, told Joe Burrow, before the kick, listen, I guess we're going to the AFC Championship game. And obviously he was able to go out there and make that kick. To know that, a kicker that young is having that much success, how much is it confidence? Like you say, you don't make the last kick bigger than the first, but how much is building confidence for a kicker, just like any other player, extremely important as far as like your success throughout your career?
Well, I think every kicker is a little different. He's clearly very confident. He's had an incredible season, and I see a lot of good things happening from that young man. He's very, very mature for his age, and he can say those kind of things and then go out there and perform. I wasn't as bold as that. It works for some kickers, and it did not work for me. I would never try to be overconfident, because if I miss a kick, then that's fairly embarrassing, and that's not a good thing to happen. So I just some guys they have it, and some guys don't. But I was more of a mellow guy, just relax and just don't get too obviously over. If you think ahead or too far ahead of what your situation is. Sometimes you can get a little complacent and not perform well. That was my mindset, at least. I just really wanted to focus on every kick at a time, and I didn't really want to talk a whole lot before a kick. I wanted to focus on my kick and not have a conversation with anybody. I was just kind of me, but every kicker is different, and clearly it's working for him. So I applaud his performance last weekend, and I look forward to seeing him kick a lot more, great field goals for that Cincinnati Bengals team.
Mike Hollis joining us here on 3 and Out. Mike, kind of take us in and how involved you are with what the team strategy is in a ball game. And I'll point this out specifically. Obviously, Tampa Bay goes in and scores with 46 seconds left, kicks the ball off, and a lot of people in the stadium go, okay, we're playing for overtime. All of a sudden, the Rams hit a big play. It's like, oh, they're going for this thing to try to kick a field goal. Are you as a kicker in, they're playing for overtime, or do you know before they even take the field, hey, we're going to try to make it happen, be ready?
I was never told anything. I had always, you always have to prepare for an opportunity to step on the field. Anytime your team has the ball, your offense is on the field, you have to know that there is a good chance that you might have to go out there and kick a field goal. And, the worst thing you can do as a kicker is be surprised. Especially like on pick sixes or something, knowing that when your team, your defense, picks off a pass and they score a touchdown, especially these days, you're kicking an extra point from 33 yards. It's like, oh crap, I haven't had a chance to warm up. I'm just like, I better just go ahead and wing it, sort of thing. So, I would never want to be surprised in a sense where, I just didn't, expect us to kick a field goal. Always be ready. In other words, that's just kind of the name of the game as a kicker.
Yeah, we saw 3 of them called on in a big moment to move their teams on to the next round. Mike, we appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it. Mike Hollis joining us here, the original Jaguars place kicker, Pro Bowler. I appreciate him joining us. And Ben, I know people say kind of the joke, oh, it's the lonely kicker over there. It's like, we love you when we need you, but, talk about that dynamic of everybody in Tampa Bay thought, hey, we're playing for overtime. And then in the span of just a few seconds, we're going to kick the game winner.
There are skill positions and there are specialty positions. I mean, I played a skill position when it came to the National Football League or football in general. There are only 3 guys that you need: punters, kickers, long snappers. Let one of those guys get hurt and chaos will ensue on those sidelines.
We've got more to come. 3 and Out here on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. It is 3 and Out on this Tuesday. We'll take 3 coming up next hour. Also, we should have the very latest. We'll know who's going into the Baseball Hall of Fame this afternoon as well. And a couple of big names be leaving the National Football League. Sean Payton, Tom Brady, where do they stand? And their future with the National Football League. We'll get to that coming up in hour number 2. Also, coming up this weekend, a Champions Parade coming up Sunday in Blackshear. Going to be honoring Georgia quarterback Stetson Bennett and his national championship win there with the Georgia Bulldogs, also honoring the 2020 state championship football team, who I think didn't have a celebration due to COVID and some of those things that happened during that 2020 season. So Champions Weekend, Champions Parade there Sunday in Blackshear. I know a lot of Georgia fans, Pierce County folks, obviously, but a lot of Georgia fans will be on hand there as well, honoring hometown hero Stetson Bennett as he goes through the championship for the Champions Parade there on Sunday.
Yeah, it should be very cool.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. And Stetson Bennett, we've heard multiple people say we'll never have to buy a meal or buy a drink, especially in Blackshear. Legend everywhere,
Yes.
but coming home, that'll be special.
At the end of the day, I mean, listen, shout out to every them Pierce County boys. I mean, you talk about Stetson Bennett, couldn't have happened to a better dude. BJ, I mean, you finally get to meet your cousin in person. I mean, your cousin in person. I'm looking forward to that.
And he is on the list. A list
Oh,
of 2 people.
He is on the list.
He's on the list. It only has 2 people on it. Hour 2 next. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, glad you're making us a part of your day. Plenty to get to this hour. Look at some of the potential big departures from the National Football League. Sean Payton, Tom Brady, potentially. We'll get to that coming up just a little bit. We'll also know the very latest on the Baseball Hall of Fame voting. Is that 2022 class should be announced right now, this afternoon. So we'll get you the very latest on that as well. Keep in mind, Kylie McDaniel, ESPN Baseball Insider, will join us coming up in the final hour of the program, and we'll get the very latest on the baseball labor talks with at least pitchers and catchers report dates scheduled for about 2 weeks from now. So a lot to get accomplished if they're not going to miss anything here in 2022. But that being said, let's take 3 here on 3 and Out. All right, fellas, take 1. Sean Payton saying he is leaving the Saints. Is it inevitable he's going to Dallas?
Kind of feels like it, right? Former assistant coach for the Cowboys, Texas native, and after the early loss in the playoffs, you had Jerry Jones come out again and say, something along the lines of, our expectation is only winning a championship, and we're going to do whatever it takes, and we have to invest. And kind of feels like timing that would make sense, right? And Dallas is desperate to have that postseason success. Dallas is willing to pay to have that postseason success. And I would imagine if you're going to get Coach Payton to leave New Orleans and potentially come to Dallas, I would guess that would be the largest contract in coaching history. It would be my guess. And certainly Jerry Jones can do that. You never know. I know this just broke, right before the start of the show a couple of hours ago, but speculation with social media all over the place that at some point Sean Payton's going to end up with the Dallas Cowboys. So given all of that conjecture and talk, I think it seems reasonable to think that that's a possibility, yes.
Sean Payton has been on the Dallas Cowboys staff. I think he was on the staff under Coach Bill Parcells. When you think about a guy like Jerry Jones, he wants to be able to have a big-name coach that already has a Super Bowl. Mike McCarthy only got the job because he had won a Super Bowl with the Green Bay Packers. The thing about a guy like Sean Payton is Sean Payton knows, look, in order for me to be successful, I have to have a top-tier quarterback. I do think Dak Prescott is a top 10 quarterback. I think he has the weapons. We talk about Zeke. We talk about CeeDee Lamb. We talk about, guys like Amari Cooper. We talk about that defense. And, BJ, you mentioned the money. He's gonna get the money. He's earned it. He's one of the best coaches in college. One of the best coaches in the National Football League. Yes, I think you could book it. Mike McCarthy was like a short-term fix. I do think Sean Payton is going to be the head coach of Dallas sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it could be interesting. Again, do you sit out a season and wait it out? How much could change in the course of a year? If the Cowboys make the playoffs and actually win a game, do you fire the coach to go get Sean Payton? Be interesting to see how it happens there as we move forward. Take 2, Tom Brady is a free agent, talking a lot about taking time with his kids and see what his family wants to do and not talking, as a matter of fact, like, hey, I'm going to play till I'm 50. If he was interested, would you bench Mac Jones and re-sign Tom Brady if you are the New England Patriots?
Of course. Of course. What kind of question is that? You're talking about the greatest quarterback of all time, and he just won the Super Bowl last season, and this season he led the league in passing yards and passing touchdowns. You can be very excited about Mac Jones. Mac had a great year. I think Mac is clearly the quarterback of the future, and barring Brady wanting to come back, he's the quarterback of the now. But if Tom Brady wants to come back to Foxborough, you're going to say, nah, man, we got a guy that just had a good rookie season. No, you're going to bring – this is not going to happen. Mm-hmm. But you're going to bring back Tom Brady and see what happens. There are no guarantees. It wouldn't be a guarantee you would win a Super Bowl. But in the last 2 years, Tom Brady led the league in passing and touchdowns and won the Super Bowl. So to have that guy come back and then all the PR and just the excitement and the tickets and yes, of course.
No, you don't do that. And this is why you don't do that. At the end of the day, Tom Brady made the decision when he said, look, I'm going to move on. From the New England Patriots. I'm going to go on to the NFC with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he's more to supersede expectations. Now, BJ, you talking about, hey, Mac, listen, I know we drafted you in the first round. I think you're the one, the only first-round quarterbacks I can remember New England drafted in a long time. No, you had an incredible rookie season, got us back to the playoffs. But but Tom's
how'd that
back.
Go?
Well, BJ, here's the thought. That was one of 14 teams to make the the playoffs. A lot of teams cannot say that. No, you don't bring back. Number one, Bill Belichick gonna say, listen, that's why I draw a line in the sand, Robert. And I'm talking about Robert Kraft. It's either me or Tom Brady. And I think Robert Kraft gonna say, okay, Tom, man, we love you and everything. And BJ, you say it's gonna be great for the PR team. No, that PR team is not gonna be able to go home because they're gonna be like, dude, we got these people flooding us with all these. No. Okay, it would be a great story, but no, that would be bad for Mac. Tom Brady, look, you've been in the league for 45 years. Give somebody else a chance. Go home. Go spend time with your family. Go spend time with your wife. Jesus.
Yeah, I think honestly, I tend to agree with Ben. I don't think you can go home. The reunion will not be as awesome as the original. All right, and again, I'm saying he just had a great year, but again, what is New England? Are they trying to build a championship for Tom Brady? Or are they trying to build a championship to win with Mac Jones?
You've told me that at every position in the NFL, regardless of who you have, you're trying to get better players.
You are.
Doesn't matter if you were a first-round pick. Is Tom Brady better than Mac Jones right now?
Well, yes.
Well, there you go.
Whoa. So we're talking about reunions. So I mean, I'm sorry. Is Shad Khan, is he calling up Blake Bortles? I mean, he took y'all to the AFC Championship
You know
game.
what? That's the perfect parallel. I was trying to think of something that would be like Tom Brady coming back to Foxborough. Blake Bortles coming back to Jacksonville.
No. Blake Bortles took y'all to the AFC Championship game, didn't he?
Is that the same as winning 6 Super Bowls
Did he
with
give
the
you
city?
a better quarterback than you had this year?
No.
So Blake Bortles wouldn't give you better than Trevor gave you this year?
Well, look at what Trevor was working with at
Whoa,
times.
This is the same BJ was saying, LaVisca Chenault. I'm talking about DJ
Shark out for the year. Travis Etienne out for the year.
So you give everybody if everybody's healthy, that's how you're gonna judge Trevor Lawrence.
Yes, Blake Bortles. When's the last time he played in the National Football League?
Because I know he did. I know he went to the AFC.
So you're saying
game.
that there's a comparability between Tom Brady, who's just led the league in passing, and Blake Bortles, who last played. Right, but when's the last time Blake Bortles played?
I mean, he played like 2 or 3 years ago.
Is
he all right? Yeah. I mean, we 2 or 3 years removed from when you wearing all Jacksonville stuff every day.
Oh, I still got it.
We know you still got it. You know,
waiting for Travis to get healthy.
So when Travis Etienne gets healthy, you're gonna break out all the Jacksonville stuff.
He's waiting for the wheels on the bandwagon to get fixed.
Oh yeah, you're right. Because being a Jaguars fan the last 20 years, you're a real part of the bandwagon.
Do you want to go out and get Gardner Minshew back?
Well, Gardner was balling. I still think he can be a starting quarterback in the league.
Do you want to start for your team though?
No.
Oh, how quickly things change. Because I was Gardner. Why would you get rid of him?
And that's what I'm saying. You can love Mac Jones, but if Tom Brady's available.
So what you're saying is you don't want a guy to drive around and Winnebagos, begging for food and gas. You want a guy that has the long locks. It's number 1 overall pick.
Trevor's the future.
Oh, here, see. There you go. What if Tom Brady want to come to Jacksonville?
Yes. What kind of question is that?
Well, we don't have to worry about that.
So we'll say, no, we're good?
No. I'm just saying, like, Trevor, we love you. Tom's in the building. Trevor,
if Tom Brady wants to come to Jacksonville, Trevor can be the backup for a year.
What if we want to sign a multi-year deal?
Well, a couple years. I mean, you told me that part of being in the NFL is you realize that every single year, at every position, the job of the front office is to get the best player possible. You told me there is no loyalty.
And all I'm proving to the listeners is this is what the front office does. You go from saying, man, I love Trevor Lawrence. Tom Brady's on line 2. Trevor, can I come back? What's up, Tom? What's up, baby?
Does it not happen with every team every year?
Listen, we're going to send you the real private jet, not that crop dust that we went and got Trevor Lawrence on. We're going to send you that real thing, the brand new one. Shad Khan is going to pick you up.
Tom Brady to the Jags.
That ain't happening. We've got one more to go. Take 3 here. Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic recently reported that the Braves discussed a trade with the A's for first baseman Matt Olson. This was before the lockout, and Ken Rosenthal said, quote, "The conversations cannot be dismissed as mere due diligence. Do you think the Braves are the favorite still to re-sign Freddie Freeman?"
I have my doubts, and I told you guys back when the season was coming to a close that it's not like all of a sudden you were managing the baseball organization, and then all of a sudden you went, some alarm went off, and it went, Freddie Freeman is now a free agent. You knew it was coming. Like, this has been on the horizon, and it hadn't been addressed. You had not reached an agreement. I think, Ben, you've told me this too. Anytime it goes to free agency, anything can happen. I mean, that's kind of the nature of free agency. And historically, the Braves have not been the team to negotiate a similar contract to what the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Cubs can offer. I think Freddie Freeman probably feels like he can get whatever he wants, essentially, on the open market, especially if there's interest from teams like the Yankees or teams like the Angels maybe have been mentioned, some other teams. I don't think the Braves can get into a contract negotiation with those sides, and the fact that this was not reached, meaning a new agreement, until we've reached a point where the season is potentially a couple of months away. I think in some ways that gives you some clues that they've not been on the same page. And the Braves had, I guess, an offer that was not what Freddie Freeman wanted. I don't feel good about it. No.
I do think the Braves are still in the driver's seat to get to land Freeman. I think sometimes people don't understand what negotiations are. I mean, it's something we talked about earlier. Yes, we talked about when we started the show, when the players give an offer and then the owners give a counter offer. It's not so much the Braves and Freddie Freeman are so far off. We talk about the numbers. I mean, it's not Alex Anthopoulos' fault. He can only whoever owns the Braves. I mean, whatever they say that they're going to offer, that's all it's going to be. Now, I do think the Braves are in the driver's seat, BJ, because there's something to say about chemistry on the team. It's something to say about having, guys like Ronald Acuna and Ozzie Albies and those guys, maybe a healthy, Mike Fonavich or whatever, I'm sorry, Mike Soroka. Sorry. Mike Soroka coming back. I just think that, we hear the number. He wants $180 million, right? It goes back to selling a house. Yeah, man, I want my house to sell for this, right? But that doesn't mean that's what I'm going to get for it. I know that they were 30 million apart.
I guess what I'm getting at is, why didn't those negotiations start sooner?
Well, BJ, man, you kind of wait to see how the season ends. And it kind of hurt the Braves because, well, I mean, the Braves want to win the World Series. They hadn't done it in a while, and then they got it done, and then Freddie Freeman was an integral part of that. So that means
hasn't he earned that big deal because of that?
I'm not saying he hasn't. But Freddie Freeman is not arguably, he is the best first baseman in baseball, right? Best first baseman. Kevin, I don't want to butcher his name. The guy they gave the new contract, Freddie Freeman, they offered him like $5 million more than that, right? And it was unheard of when they offered him that money. But BJ, I'm telling you, it's not disrespect on the Braves' part. Because what did we start saying about these contracts after year one, after year two? See, I mean, you might have gave Freddie Freeman too much, because I get it. It has worked. The Freddie Freeman experiment has worked, but the Solairs and the Rosario, that kind of stuff helps as well. I just think that when you're trying to give him 180, right? What's the percentage that Ronald Acuna gonna reach the end of his deal? So you giving Freddie Freeman, what you gonna have to get? I'm telling you, it's all about the present and the future. You thinking about those things. I do think the Braves are the front runner, and maybe the lockout is giving them more time to send out text messages that probably shouldn't be going out to agents. But I mean, $180 million. It's going to be hard for Freddie Freeman to get. It's going to be hard for him to get that in Atlanta. I just think that hopefully cooler heads will prevail, and they can hopefully try to meet in the middle.
Yeah, I still think there is a lot of impetus to get it done, because the Braves have no other backup plan if Freddie Freeman goes. I mean, you could say, well, they're going to trade, but I think some of that is, to me, due diligence, because you have to play the what if. And as far as why didn't the contract negotiations start earlier? Well, why did Major League Baseball and Players Union not start talking till today and yesterday?
Let me ask you this, because I don't know how this works. Like, if this is pre the lockout,
right?
If you explore a trade, why would you be doing that for due diligence if there wasn't a desire to act on it?
To show that, hey, do you really want to be in Atlanta? Because we're thinking we're at least exploring opportunities of moving on, and I think some of it's still a negotiation tactic. Like, look, hey, we want you to be here. It is. We want you to be here, but we are at the same time.
You're saying that was maybe a sign to the Freeman camp saying we're considering other options.
We want you to be here, but if you're going to drive a hard line, because I think everybody knows Freddie Freeman wants to stay. But if you're going to drive a hard line of maybe more we want to play, we are exploring other options of other first basemen. I think it's a high stakes game of poker face and chicken involving major league contracts. You may not like to hear it that way, but I think that's what it is, because both parties have also openly said we both want to make this work. So what else could it be? You have two parties that want to be there. Somebody's got to flinch and say, I'm willing to concede something to get there. I think you don't think the other way? You don't think the stories of, well, Freddie Freeman's really starting to look at the Yankees? You don't think that was floated? Who do you think floated that out there? To put pressure on the Braves to say, you really going to let him walk to the Yankees? All that stuff's put out there for a reason. At the end of the day, I still feel good about the Braves making it happen with Freddie Freeman at the end of the day. That's take 3. We got more to come here. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you here on this Tuesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, a lot going on around the National Football League, including Sean Payton saying he is stepping away from the New Orleans Saints. Maybe a year sabbatical. Maybe he winds up with the Cowboys, as we talked about there in Take 3. Tom Brady also apparently mulling retirement and or leaving Tampa Bay. I guess it would no longer be called Tampa Bay there at that point. But you start looking at it. No Tom Brady. No Sean Payton. And what's left in the division? And you're talking about a Tampa Bay team that Ben has talked about this is coming up where they won the Super Bowl, lost nobody, not a single player from the Super Bowl team. And now they were into the playoffs again after a very successful regular season. And it's time for people to get paid. Tampa Bay could look drastically different after guys go out and get their cheese. If you're the Atlanta Falcons and you simply don't screw this thing up with a nice free agent class, you have Matt Ryan coming back. If Tom Brady doesn't come back, you've got the most experienced quarterback in the division. Could you be talking about a pretty significant turnaround if you're the Atlanta Falcons? I think 3 picks in the top 60. Is that correct? Did I have that right? So if you get this thing done smartly, could it be a pretty nice turnaround for Atlanta in what could be a pretty weak division in 2022?
Yes, and I think we were all looking at the Sean Payton news thinking, after Sean Payton stepping away, you thought, okay, well, that leaves a very big question mark for the New Orleans Saints, who already have a very big question mark at quarterback, where Taysom Hill is re-signed, Jameis Winston's a free agent. I don't know what's going on with that roster. And then you look at Carolina, not a lot of optimism there. I mean, just being honest, Sam Darnold, Matt Rule on the hot seat already. I mean, that's not – I don't think you're going to see them projected to make deep playoff runs next year. And you look at Tampa, right? Now, if Tom Brady comes back, that's the end of this argument. But there seems to be, if there's at least a momentum online for whatever that's worth, there seems to be a lot of people implying or suggesting that there's a good chance he doesn't come back. Now, that could be due to retirement, or that could be due to, hey, I want to go play somewhere else. I don't want to play in Tampa. But if that happens, you already have Gronk's a free agent. He's not coming back if Brady doesn't. Chris Godwin's a free agent. You're talking about Leonard Fournette's a free agent. I mean, the Bucs, if they lose Brady, could very easily go into rebuild mode. And if that happens, you have a rebuilding Bucs. You have I don't know what's going on with the Saints. And you have I really don't know what's going on with the Panthers. Now, I don't think any of us think the Atlanta Falcons have a Super Bowl roster. But to get into the playoffs, you just have to be the best team in your division. And if Tom Brady does not come back to Tampa, I think right now Atlanta feels like they're the best team in the division because of the quarterback situation. You would have an unknown essentially in Carolina, an unknown in New Orleans, and an unknown in Tampa. And the Falcons would have Matt Ryan and Kyle Pitts. And, there's still some franchise pieces. Now, you would have to address wide receiver. What are you doing there? What's happening defensively? Can you get better? But Christian we were going through some of the numbers earlier. I think you're going to enter the free agency period with about $10 to $12 million. So you're in a better position now for Terry Fontenot and others potentially, or for Terry Fontenot to kind of look at some other prospects potentially to bring in via free agency. And you have 3 of the top 60 picks in the draft. And that's pretty good, including a top 10 pick. And I want to get y'all's thoughts on this. If you're Terry Fontenot and you're looking, maybe now, are you looking around going, I already like the roster. Now I'm looking around. You think the Falcons might be aggressive this offseason in terms of bringing in, where maybe it was kind of the slow build before, and now you're looking around the division going, we can win this thing. I mean, we can be the pretty clear favorite if this stuff happens, the pretty clear favorite on paper in the division.
I mean, BJ and Kevin, I think, but BJ specifically, I think you just said it. Terry Fontenot, people say, why would he leave New Orleans, man? He done built it up. Terry Fontenot knew what was coming, right? Like, I'm pretty sure the general manager knows kind of what's going on with the whole organization, including the head coach. And he's looking around saying, Drew Brees is leaving. Jameis Winston ain't the answer. Taysom Hill's an experiment. Trevor Siemian was a Band-Aid. And these Saints in 2022 are in the same position that the Falcons were in 2021. They don't have no money to spend. So now when you think about a guy like Sean Payton moving on, yes, I think it is time for this Falcons teams to be aggressive. I mean, I know they're going to have to address certain positions in the offseason, in free agency, as well as guys, with the draft. But I do think this is, the best teams in the division usually have the best quarterback. Well, Matty Ice is, I mean, far and ahead the best quarterback in this division. We think about he's a regular season MVP. He's been with the same team his whole career. Tampa, BJ, forget rebuild. They may go back to what Tampa was. Like, let's face it, the last 2 years, Tampa have superseded expectations because of Tom Brady. Because a lot of those guys were on the team before Tom Brady got there. You added Gronk and Leonard Fournette. Mike Evans he's had 1,000 yards every season he's been in. Chris Godwin is not going to get re-signed because he's coming off an injury. Vita Vea got a contract extension. I think Adama Sue. I don't know. I think his final years are coming up. With the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So yes, it's time for Atlanta to say, all right, we got to address something. We got to get a wide receiver. Got to get a running back. Got to re-sign Cordell Patterson. Got to address the defensive line, and maybe we get some secondary help. But even if you can't beat the Saints without Sean Payton, without Drew Brees, unless the Saints – now, I've heard some rumblings. Now, if Russell Wilson go to New Orleans –
oh, boy.
Because that's another thing, too. He wants out of Seattle. He's going to have some heavy suitors. He want to go to a team that's established. It's got a lot of veterans and obviously in a division that he can win. And he's been in the NFC his whole career, so I don't think he's going to want to change that. But then I still think Carolina – I don't know what Matt Rule got against this owner. They gave him like a 7-year deal. They don't want it. That buyout is probably serious. So I do think Atlanta got a shot to be. They don't got to be good. They just got to be the best in their division. Yes, they can win that division. Now it's going to be ugly to win it.
I like that. You don't have to be good. You just have to win the division.
That's the AFC South.
Think about
it. Is.
It is.
I mean, the Titans were good.
But what I'm saying is, right?
How good did you have to be?
It's like when we be looking at football the wrong way. We look at overall records. That's not what you need to be looking at. It's like bowl games, man. It was only 6 and 7. Did they get in the bowl game? Yeah. Who cares? The goal is to win your division. You win your division. Guess what? You get to host a playoff game. Doesn't matter what the other team did. So the goal is to win the division. You have to say, where do we need help in? The Falcons, number one, it's outside of that, on Thursday night against New England, that was just ugly to watch. The Falcons was in a lot of games this year that they lost. It's not like they just laid an egg in a lot of these games. Tom Brady leaving, Sean Payton leaving, makes his whole division looks totally different. Matty Ice is saying, look, I ain't got but one more
run.
Yeah, because we keep on saying this. Hey, man, Matty Ice got about 2 years. Yeah, we said that 2 years ago. He got one more good year, BJ, and I'm sorry.
Well, if he gets hit as much as he gets this year,
well, that's what I'm saying. Listen, Matty Ice got one more good year, and I think Matty Ice has earned a shot at one more run. Like, he's like, look, man, we're going to go all in. We're going to try to give you some help. We're not going to, quote, Aaron Rodgers you. We're not going to know what you need. Don't give it to you. Let the draft come and go. Now, I don't know what we're going to do about the offensive line. That's
No, but that's where you look at being in the top 10 in the draft, where, you look around and you have some guys that have emerged, right? I mean, even on the offensive line, Chris Lindstrom was on some all-pro teams, the guard out of Boston College. But maybe if you can get and you don't know who's going to be there at 8, but 8 is pretty high in the draft. The Falcons aren't normally accustomed to drafting that high. If you can get a Derek Stingley, if you can get a Kyle Hamilton, if you can get a Charles Cross, if you could get a Jordan Davis saw in a mock draft, I mean, are these the type of players that could give you that little extra boost you might need? Kevin, as you've long said about the defense, I mentioned some defensive guys there. You don't have to be awesome on defense. Can you be okay? Can you be pretty good? And given what we're seeing in the division, potentially that might be good enough to win the division.
Arthur Smith look, we talked about this too. Arthur Smith, I don't know how you're going to treat this year's preseason. I bet it won't be like last year's. I guarantee it. I don't want to listen. I love Orlando. I mean, dear Orlando, those guys. I'm going to say, dear Orlando, if you say one more thing about Mike Davis, I'm going to jump through this phone. Because what happens is, BJ, when I was in the National Football League, it took me a year to understand certain things. He goes, listen, dude, he said, it's our goal to compete with the Colts. And I said, why can't we beat them? And somebody smacked me. Well, you can't beat no Colts, boy. But if you could compete with them, you could beat everybody else. Because so the thing is, when you think about this Falcons team, your goal is to say, look, man, we have to win this division. That is our only path forward to making the playoffs. Because they start looking outside of the division. Any other division, not the NFC South, I feel very, very, I don't feel good about the Falcons' chances. But the NFC South, Taysom Hill, Trevor Siemian, Jameis Winston, Tampa Bay, I love Kyle Trask, but he hasn't played a down of football yet. And when you talk about Sam Darnold, I mean, he was seeing ghosts up there in New York. I mean, he's seeing the sky up there in Charlotte because they can't block nobody. Cam Newton is the backup. He don't scare nobody either. So I just think, BJ, 2022 has to be a year. Samuel Jackson, come on out with the commercials, the Rise Up, T.I., Future, everybody that root for the Falcons, Quavo, y'all be on the sideline. Whether it's fake love or not, we going to need it all. Dion, listen, please don't take down, because we up there watching the rounds. Here come Prime. BJ looking at me like, it's Prime. And listen, and Prime had no hair. He got to come back because, he got a full head of hair. I mean, comeback player of the year is Prime's hair, hair. Brian Urlacher's hair and Drew Brees' hair. So I'm just saying that's a comeback hair of the year.
And again, BJ, as I said, in terms of points per game, I went and looked it up because I agree.
You
know what I'm saying?
Stats. It's happening.
No, I'm saying, but you don't have to be great defensively. You just need to be competent. Let's take a look at the top 10 teams in total defense in terms of points per game allowed. Buffalo, they went home.
Yep.
New England, they went home. Denver, they weren't even in the playoffs. They were number 3 in scoring defense. Didn't even make New Orleans, Tampa Bay. Well, they gave up a huge drive with no time there's the end of that game. They're out. Tennessee, they went home. Dallas, they went home. Kansas City, still in it at 8. Indianapolis, not in the playoffs.
Nope.
And San Francisco at 9. So 2 teams in the top 10 in defense are in the Final 4 right now. Cincinnati, down in the middle of the pack. Rams, down in the middle of the pack.
Gotta be okay.
So it just got to be okay. You can't be down there in the Atlanta.
Isn't that the greatest news you ever got?
Was 4th from the bottom in total scoring defense.
I mean, no. But BJ and Kevin, think about that. If a defensive coordinator comes in and say, "Listen, the camera's on. Hey, fellas, we got to get it going. Camera's gone. Fellas, listen. We just can't suck." Think about it.
Pretty much.
That's true.
Because I kept saying this. Listen, BJ, I ask you questions, and I'll say, BJ, we need to play complementary defense. You'll say, now, what do you mean by complementary? I mean not suck. I mean we just got to listen. A couple of 3 and outs, right? Don't let teams just go crazy, because that's what hasn't that been Atlanta's defense since we known Atlanta Falcons? It's always been complimentary, right? It's never like, man, we won with a defensive effort. When have we ever said that in the history of the Falcons? So all I'm saying is these young boys now are carrying on the tradition of complimentary defensive football, but the problem is it's not complimentary. It's awful. You got to get off the field. So we'll see what happens.
We've got more to come here. 3 and out. Big day for Major League Baseball, not only at the negotiating table, but we'll find out the latest in the Hall of Fame class that will be announced later tonight, and some big names out there on the ballot, and some big names could fall off if they don't get in. We'll get to that next. It's 3 and out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you back here on 3 and Out. Of course, baseball in the midst of labor negotiations, and we will talk to Kylie McDaniel, ESPN Baseball Insider, coming up in the final hour of the program. Also going to have the announcement or the release of the 2022 Hall of Fame class coming up a little bit later tonight. And this is an important one, guys, because you'll have guys in the last stage of their Hall of Fame ballot in terms of the Writers Association, guys like Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, and others who were involved in that steroid era of baseball, who, if they don't get in this time, might potentially fall off. Now, I know there's been some loosening of opinions and minds as this has gone on, and those guys have actually gotten a little bit more of the vote. But if you don't get in, it falls to the Veterans Committee. And again, we'll see what former players think about those guys who were suspected of steroid use. And some cases like A-Rod, of course, a lot of people don't think A-Rod's going to get in. And some projections out there on that. But you could have a class of David Ortiz, potentially. Barry Bonds was on the fringe. Roger Clemens, and some guys doing some projections because some writers have made their ballots public when they vote. They're projecting that with about 50% of the ballot known that Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds would get in. You need 75%. With about 50% of the ballot known, they're trending at like 76, 77%.
Would you expect? I mean, they have not gotten in yet. So I guess what would the change be?
I guess just over time, you look at it and say, you know what? They played in an era where a large portion of the league was suspected of doing this thing, and it was kind of the era they've changed it. And maybe you just loosen your stance and say those guys were Hall of Famers in the era in which they played in. Maybe there's a footnote. And I know some guys have said, look, it happened, and baseball's tried to clean it up. And are you going to hold it over their head forever? Kind of like what baseball's done with Pete Rose. Like, hey, he gambled on baseball. He was banned from baseball, and you're like, you now actively run ads in the stadium for DraftKings at baseball games. Are you going to at some point say, Pete, who bet on himself, by the way, bet on his team to win? I'm not saying it makes it right, but are you going to hold that over him for the rest of his life and into after he's dead? Or are you going to say, look, this dude has more hits than anybody that's ever played this game in the history of this entire planet, but we can't let him in? It's going to be interesting to see how the stances of some guys maybe have changed as they have aged over time, because you get farther removed from the immediacy of it. Some guys will look back and say, well, maybe I was a little harsh in my early assessment of it. I'll change my mind.
I think sometimes when you start talking about like how they always say, man, you want to show you how a person really is, get that person power. When you talk about these baseball sports writers, the guys that's over the Hall of Fame vote, you start asking yourself, so we can enjoy Clemens, we can enjoy Barry Bonds, we can enjoy their seasons. I mean, we can enjoy it. But when it comes time to do right by them, like, okay.
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of people that feel that the Barry Bonds home run record is a bit fraudulent because he was hitting more home runs at 40 years old. Do
you think they're just trying to protect, Hammer and Hank's record at this point?
But I don't even know if they're trying to do. I think they look at it and say, there was no suspicion of steroids for Hank Aaron when he played.
Yeah.
He hit 755 home runs. Barry Bonds hit more home runs at 40 and 40 plus than he did at 20. That doesn't happen. Right? I mean, Tom Brady might be challenging that a little bit, but by and large, you don't throw more touchdowns at 42 than you did at 28. You don't hit more home runs playing 162 games at 42 than you do at 28. You don't sometimes look physically more ripped up and cut up at 42 than you do at 28. You may be fatter, you may be thicker with age, but typically, BJ, you're not more swole at 40 than you are at 28.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's just, I'm just saying, that's just, and people say, well, he was never caught. Okay. I mean, how many dudes, look a certain way at 28 and then at 42 are like the most jacked human being you've ever seen?
You're
right.
I'm not, what I'm saying. But
I guess, how do you contextualize the steroid era? Because like you said,
how long did it go on?
Hold on though, because Kevin, you would know, you're, more the baseball historian here on the show, but you've seen reports, accusations, books, whatever that say a substantial amount of,
right.
And is that largely assumed? And I don't know what substantial means, but that was a regular part of the game. Steroids, right? So would it be consistent to only say I'm going to vote against guys who clearly tested positive? Or
I think there are some that said if there was a known positive test that they tested for steroid, I'm not voting for them. And I think that's against A-Rod.
That would be like no A-Rod, no Clemens.
Right, and A-Rod's obviously over 600 homers and all that. But I think you look at the era they played in, you could say, well, everybody was doing it. I know going back to the lessons you get taught as a kid, well, if everybody's doing it, doesn't mean it's right at the end of the day. But you had a history of baseball where nobody broke the single-season home run record for, 40, 50 years. And then all of a sudden you had Sosa, Bonds, McGuire, like 3 or 4 guys. All
and Sosa's still on the ballot, right?
Sosa's still, and all of a sudden you had 3 or 4 guys all at the same time going for 60+ and breaking records. You're going, this just doesn't add up. That it would be a hard thing to achieve. And now all of a sudden, now that baseball's cleaned it up, you're kind of back in that 40, 50 home run guy is really the leader. And he's probably way out and mashing ahead of everybody else. You don't see guys anymore pushing 60, 70 home runs like you randomly did. So why is that? You can say I had a failed test, but why Barry Bonds in the era where you did it natural, where you hitting 73 home runs and nobody since baseball, quote, cleaned itself up has come anywhere close to that? Anywhere close to that.
I mean, hasn't he like at this point, right? He is at the mercy of the voters.
Sure.
And he knows this. But Kevin, I mean, you being a baseball guy, like you
right.
are a baseball guy. I know trying to clean up the game. I can respect trying to clean up the game. Is baseball still baseball if the greatest home run hitter that we've ever seen is not in the Hall of Fame?
Well, and you've also heard the argument, though. Hold on. You've also heard the argument. And again, I don't know how you point to it, but you've heard people say even before Barry Bonds became a power hitter, he was clearly a Hall of Fame player.
He was already kind of a power hitter, but he was not in that stratosphere. And I just look at it and say, I think I'm one that thinks Barry Bonds was a Hall of Famer before all the steroid implications went out there. And I know people say, well, if everybody's doing it, I get it. I just look at it and say, people would always come back in that era and say, steroids don't help you hit a baseball. No, but you're in Major League Baseball. If you are in Major League Baseball, you have elite hand-eye coordination. There's no, I don't care if you're a guy hitting 200. If you're in Major League Baseball, you have elite hand-eye coordination to be able to hit a baseball that's going 90, 95, 100 mile an hour in some cases and moving with a round bat trying to hit a round ball. You have elite hand-eye coordination. So it doesn't help you hit a baseball. You can already do that. Will it help you hit it 10 feet farther?
It could.
If it helps you hit it 10 feet farther, all of a sudden those 290-foot blasts become home runs.
But I guess to reverse those, and I don't know what the right. I'm asking to reverse those questions. Was A-Rod a Hall of Famer pre Barry Bonds?
I think there was many that would think he was on that track. Now, obviously, he gets to New York, starts hitting more home runs. He gets caught with steroids. I think there are people that will hold that against him and say your numbers into lock Hall of Fame status were inflated because you were cheating.
Or could
the game.
Be? It's not so much. It's not so much that you weren't a Hall of Fame player. It's I'm not voting you in because you clearly cheated. It's that more so than the cheating itself turns you into a Hall of Fame player.
Sure, I think it enhances what was going to be a Hall of Fame resume and puts your numbers in an askew format where were you one of the best ever? Maybe were you top 5 all-time homers, Alex Rodriguez?
Now,
maybe not without the roids.
Now, I will say this. I mean, because I can see both sides of it. I played in the era of Sean Merriman. Sean Merriman got caught with PEDs. Sean Merriman came out with PEDs, and I think he still had like 18 sacks. He was still like off a defensive player of the year. The reason why I can see both sides is this. Coming from a player who I felt as though my talent was enough, if I'm going up against a guy and I come to find that this guy was cheating, it makes you feel a type way because it's like, well, dude, that is a significant competitive edge over me. If our talent is right at the same level and you taking something that's going to boost it.
And it's not even that. Obviously, steroids to help you recover faster, get back on the field quicker, right? I mean, that's why you would do that.
Yeah, and look, but at the same time, too, this is what I would ask the writers. I would be like, look, man, like, listen, you can do the right thing and still, clean up baseball. Because since then, I mean, unless there's something crazy, I think guys are scared to death to even do that, to even attempt to do that. Because like you said, Kevin, we ain't seen no 70-something home runs. But I'm just saying, at the end of the day, Barry Bonds is a Hall of Famer. He just, he just made a bad decision, even though he never got caught. A-Rod got caught, twice with it, Kevin? I think he got caught twice.
At least once, yeah.
At least once. I'm just saying, Kevin, because what happens is, if you're one of those writers, the question is, do you vote those guys in?
I think some of them it will be hard to do, knowing that I feel like they got an advantage. Some of those guys, I feel like Barry Bonds to me was on a Hall of Fame trajectory without it. Mark McGwire was probably on a Hall of Fame trajectory without it. And
Clemens?
Clemens was probably on a Hall of Fame trajectory. I mean, as a rookie, I think he came in and I think he had a 20 strikeout game as a rookie. I mean, he was putting up major numbers as a young player and was probably a Hall of Famer without it. It's unfortunate that they felt they needed to do that, and maybe they extended their career to get them into that, extra stratosphere. We got more to come here. 3 and Out, Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kylie McDaniel, ESPN Baseball Insider, will join us coming up in just a little bit. We'll also take a look at some NFL draft coming up as well. We mentioned the big Champions Parade in Blackshear this Sunday, honoring Georgia quarterback Stetson Bennett and the Georgia Bulldogs and the 2020 Pierce County State Championship football team. But big story up on ESPNCoastal.com. Encourage you to check out by our own Christian Gokel. Did a story on Luke Bennett, no relation to BJ Bennett. Luke Bennett, Stetson Bennett's brother, who's also trying to pursue football at the collegiate level as well. So a great read there, and I encourage you to do that. Also a little high school basketball tonight on ESPNCoastal.com. We got a little Beach versus Groves tonight. Nice region basketball matchup there. You can go to ESPNCoastal.com, go to ESPN Coastal on our YouTube channel, and check out that ball game tonight. But go to ESPNCoastal.com, and you read Christian's story on Luke Bennett, brother of Stetson Bennett, trying to pursue football there at the next level.
Yeah, and a really in-depth interview-based story. So check that out. Great work by Christian. And then excited to see more high school basketball tonight with PJ and Cam. Those guys do a great job. So looking forward to the basketball. But, yeah, check out that story on ESPNCoastal.com if you haven't yet.
So I'm listening. I would love to see the Bennett, family tradition, get extended, Kevin, with the brother of Stetson Bennett, Luke. I mean, look, he's going to definitely get a shot now, right? He's going to have to get used to saying, "Are you Stetson Bennett's brother?" But if that's what I got to do to get a scholarship, so be it.
So great read there. Go check it out. We'll come back. Kylie McDaniel will join us. We're talking Major League Baseball, day 2 of some talks there. Today, what's the very latest out of the MLB? He'll join us when we return here on 3 and Out. Hit us up on Twitter. Love to hear from you at Pigskin Radio. We're streaming live, ESPNCoastal.com. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on this Tuesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, Major League Baseball having day 2 of talks to try to figure out this labor situation, as spring training, at least as of now, would set to be starting in a couple of weeks with pitchers and catchers reporting. Obviously, a lot of fans would love for them to meet those deadlines. And joining us here to talk about it, ESPN MLB insider Kylie McDaniel joins us here on 3 and Out. Kylie, welcome to the show. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, man, appreciate you joining us. What can you tell us about what's happened over the last couple of days? Is there a sense that a work stoppage would be majorly detrimental to the sport if it were to happen here in 2022?
Yeah, the last few days we've seen the thing that everyone around the sport has been like sort of calling for since the lockout happened on December 1st, which was, well, both sides have said these are like, if you think of it like a spectrum, like from, left to right, if you want to think political and apply it to the two sides in the labor negotiation, they've said what their two extreme stances are. And we can imagine somewhere in the middle what the middle is of their stances on, say, 8 or 10 different topics. And you're like, okay, let's just take like somewhere around the middle, maybe to their side on this one, maybe to their side on this one, but around the middle in each of these 10 things. Well, why don't we just, sit there for a couple of days and we'll work it out? But the problem is they don't do anything until they have to, and deadlines are what makes them do stuff. And as you're mentioning, we're a couple weeks away from pitchers and catchers reporting, and then like a month away from like spring training games happening. And so now that's why this week we finally have seen both sides have moved a little off of their extreme stance and moved a little toward the middle on a couple of issues. And then the other side, in response, the league today basically countered the players coming off of a couple of their stances. They came off a couple of their stances and sort of clarified, like, hey, we don't want to come off of this one. We'll come off of these two. We'll consider talking about these topics. We'll agree with you on A, B, and C. And we just got 24 more letters to go through. But there's movement. So that's good. But it's also 2 months later than it needed to be.
So at this point, what are the most dramatic or most pressing, points of contention?
So this is funny. About 2 weeks ago, I kept reading the articles that, my colleague Jeff Pass and Jesse Rogers have been writing and other people have been writing. And I started losing track of what was going on as somebody that's in the middle of this. And I texted Jeff and I said, does anybody have an article where there's a table of here's the topic, here's the two stances, and then here's the, a reasonable middle. And he's like, yeah, no one's done that. And I'm like, well, I'm now reading, and I went through and read all the articles for the last 2 months trying to catch up on what had been happening. And I realized the reason it had confused me is there's literally 15 different topics that they are negotiating over. And multiple times one side would offer something, the other side would counter, and then the first side would completely take the thing they proposed last time off the table and propose a totally different thing. So it's almost like they've choreographed this dance where it's all right, we're going to sit at a 10, you'll sit at a 0. We'll go to 8. All right, now we'll go to 9. All right, now we'll go to 7. And so that's what they're sort of fighting over. And some of the topics that they're doing these sorts of things with, I won't bore you with all the specific details, but the players basically want to get more of the payroll paid to younger players because the teams are paying or playing more of the younger players. And so basically they're becoming more of the playing time. And so the players want them to get more of the money. So you have to basically change the rules for that to happen. Because basically if you're in your first 3 years in the league, you make the minimum all 3 years. And so they're negotiating over a couple different ways to do that, including incentive bonuses based on how well you play, raising the minimum itself, changing when arbitration, which is years 3 through 6, changing how and when that goes, how much they get paid, when it ends, when it starts, all that sort of thing. And each one of those have a couple different mechanisms around them. And then the rest of it is basically in some way tied to competitive balance, whether it's a draft lottery or it's revenue sharing, those sorts of ideas. Or if we go to an international draft, we have trading of picks. These are all things that on their own don't really do anything, but both sides see if we take universal DH and expanded playoffs, that maybe increases the money, so this side wants it. But then we'll do a draft lottery, so teams don't want to tank as much, and then we'll do less revenue sharing, so that then low revenue teams can't just pocket money. And in concert, they move 4 or 5 of those in one direction. The other side moves 4 or 5 things they want, and then they sort of find somewhere in the middle.
When you think about right now, as you mentioned, it hasn't really been a couple of weeks away from pitches. Those guys are reporting. How much of a disadvantage are the players at? Because when you think about the negotiating table, this is what owners do all the time. And as you mentioned, when you think about the guys who this really represented, you talk about the mid-tier, the low-tier guys who want to go from $615,000 to $775,000 minimum. We're talking about guys who only make money on the field. They don't make money away from baseball.
Yeah, one of the talking points on the owner side is it's millionaires versus billionaires, trying to make it so that the average fan doesn't care about this, because it's people that have more money than they do. Who cares which side it is? And in reality, almost half the players aren't millionaires because they play a year or two. The minimum, which they get, only if they play the entire season and stay up the entire year, which most of them don't. You have to then play 2 full years. You take out taxes and such. You're still not at $1 million. And so it's really like some millionaires and a lot of people making less than that, or in the career earnings are less than that, versus billionaires. And then another topic that has come up is players that are on the 40-man roster cannot be in contact with their team. And there's been some stories where like a player on the back of a team's 40-man roster has a wedding, has invited a coach, and the coach can't come because they can't be in the same place. Now imagine if that player is coming off a Tommy John surgery and is going through rehab, and now for 3 months he can't go in the team facility because he's been going in every day. You got all kinds of little things like that, in addition to, as you're getting at, like just a bigger picture of the players union is sort of run by agents and the sort of famous players making a lot of money, and they're representing a lot of big leaguers that aren't making a lot of money, and they're also representing high school, college, and international free agents who haven't signed yet or in the minor leagues that are not part of the union and are making even less money and are not even part of the union. So it's like it's very easy for 30 billionaires to be on the same side and not talk to the media and present a united front. And if you think about who the players union is representing, it's almost impossible for them to all be on the same page. And that's why some of the messaging stuff can get a little muddy at this time.
Kylie McDaniel, ESPN MLB Insider, our guest here on 3 and Out. And Kylie, I'm surprised, again, when you talk about competitiveness and good for the game and getting more players paid, that the players haven't pushed for maybe like a minimum payroll. I know baseball doesn't have a salary cap, but I know in the NFL you have to spend, 97% of the salary cap. Could there be an issue that the players raise, say, look, we can't have Baltimore spending less money than one player makes on a whole nother roster? Why wouldn't the players push to have a minimum spend by these owners to increase competitive balance amongst the league and get more guys paid across the league?
So this is something that's bothered me for years, and conversations I have with people that are really in the know still don't completely understand it. But the stance that the players union has taken is that if we put in a salary floor, that then begs for a salary ceiling. And once there's a salary ceiling, then that will keep salaries from rising, because then all the teams at the very top that spend the most money, they typically are the ones signing guys for $300 million. So once you limit how much they can spend, then that top end of the market that defines everything will stop going up. So now they're trying to change all the incentives around it. Like, oh, we're not going to give the teams at the bottom, instead of them getting $100 million in revenue sharing, they only get $10 million. We'll cap it at that. That was in their most recent proposal, so that team can't run a $30 million payroll and be terrible. Like, it won't be viable at that point. So that's like the way they're trying to get at it. And I think there's other things they can do in terms of, like, one of the proposals that the players union made was that you can't be in the top 5 picks at the draft 3 years in a row. There's different ways to sort of disincentivize tanking, and that's the way they've chosen to go about it. I tend to think, because right now, the way we have the luxury tax set up, almost all of the teams are treating that as a salary cap anyway. Like, the Dodgers went over this year, the Yankees went over the year before, but generally teams go over, they just barely go over. So it's like a soft cap, basically. So they already have a cap on top, the thing that they said they didn't want anyway. They functionally have one. So why not, like you're saying, put one on the bottom and just make, both ends of that a little more set in stone? And they just are completely against it. And there's a couple other topics like that it won't bother going into around the draft, where I think it would be good for everybody, but the union just decided that is like a stance they're not interested in, and they'd rather get at that problem a different way.
Is there a chance, with all the negotiations, all the complexities, that baseball might not be played by opening day, or do you think that's not in danger of possibly happening yet?
So I'm going to pull it up. I actually have done 2 polls on my Twitter account to see what the sentiment was, because when this whole thing started December 1st, which everyone knew was happening, year in advance, I assumed it was 85-90% chance that we would get, maybe not 162 games, but at least 150, like some reasonable number close to that full thing. So I put out a poll on December 2nd, and 43% of people said we're going to play 162 games, like the full thing, which surprised me. I thought it would be less than that. And I did it again last week, and 50% of people thought it would be 150 games or more. So that's just, the random, mostly baseball fans that follow me on Twitter. I still tend to think that there is too much to be lost. And most of these TV contracts have it written into it that if it's less than 150 games, then all of a sudden the TV networks don't have to pay you as much. So I think that's where the pain is, because, one season you miss 15 of your 30 spring training games. It's not that much money. So like if spring training gets dramatically reduced, one time over the next 5 years, I don't think the owners really feel any pain there. The players aren't getting paid, so they don't lose any money there. So that's not enough pain to make somebody do something they don't want to do. Whereas getting below 150 games, because they can condense the schedule a bit. Like they could take a whole month off the season, but only miss 15 games or so. And make that work. So I think, April 1st is sort of like, that's when, the season's supposed to start. I think May 1st is the actual cutoff. If we can't get on the field playing major league games by May 1st, then all of a sudden teams are not making the money they were making off their TV contracts. You have to change like the structure of the playoffs, all kinds of stuff like that starts happening. So and then obviously you need like at least 3 or 4 weeks ramp up to finish free agency and have a version of spring training, all that kind of thing. So in reality, I think, mid-March or so is when stuff has to happen. And I think that is what will happen. Like these guys, they still respond to deadlines, even if they seem like they don't care.
Kylie, when it's all said and done, how confident are you that this Players Association can really go toe-to-toe with owners who have proven in the past to kind of just let's look at these guys as a pushover and say, look, man, we're going to go back and forth because we have to, but when it's all said and done, we're going to give you a low ball offer, and we're going to use time and money on our side, and hopefully you guys say yay because we the billionaires and the billionaires versus millionaires type of thing. How confident you think this PA can finally, grow a backbone and kind of stand up to these owners?
Well, they've been collecting all of the merchandise rights money and not distributing it to players for the last 5 years so that they can pay players $5,000 a month for as long as they need to. So they're trying to position themselves so it's not, the billionaire owners can say like, oh, well, we can, we got these teams that are worth $1 billion. We can borrow money against them as much as we need to. Like, we're not going to feel pain for years, whereas the players will. And that's kind of always going to be true in labor negotiations to some degree. But they position themselves, I think, with their stances being pretty reasonable. I think, as I said before, you can see what these middle grounds are, and they're moving closer to them. Eventually, we're going to find out, I think, in about 2 weeks, what things that one side wants to be able to move on, and the other side is like, I will absolutely not move. And it's like, okay, now we'll move on, or we'll get in a fight over it, and that's it. So, yeah, I think things are lining up for the union with some different negotiators, and I think some urgency and some messaging has all shifted in a way that is helpful. I think the public has turned against the owners, whereas a couple CBAs ago, that was not really a thing that existed. So I think things are lined up for it to be an actually fair deal and to not lose more than 10 or 12 games. I just think there's too many things pointing at that happening. But yeah, the owners have won the last 2 handily. So like history would say, bet on the billionaires. But I think everything's lining up to say this one should be pretty close to even.
Kylie McDaniel, ESPN MLB Insider, our guest here on 3 and Out. And finally, Kylie, when this does get done, is it as simple like, hey, the deal's signed, tomorrow free agency starts? Because I know in this state, obviously, fans are very intrigued with whether or not the Braves can get Freddie Freeman to come back. I mean, is that kind of the timeline? Hey, you signed the deal, and it's the Wild West with free agency starting immediately.
Yeah, I think it might be like pause a day or two once it's reported that there's been an agreement. It'll take a day or two for all the, I's to be dotted and T's to be crossed and whatnot. And to make sure that the rules around free agency and everyone understands exactly what their budgets are and if any rules have changed around that. But yeah, I would imagine once it gets reported that there is an agreement, free agency will start in less than a week after that. And I would bet that Freddie Freeman will sign pretty quickly. And I would also say Carlos Correa, the other, definite 9-figure player, he switched agencies to Scott Boras, who negotiated the Corey Seager, Marcus Semien, Scherzer, negotiated all those deals. He's got a lot of other guys on his plate, Conforto, Bryant, Rodon, a lot of those guys. And he just got Correa, who's the top dog. He's going to want to get him off the board soon, too. And I think it might be, I would say the 2 most likely teams would be Yankees with Correa and Braves with Freeman. And I think both of them are motivated to move quickly because if they don't get those players, they got to get somebody else. So I think we might see some more fireworks that we saw at the end of free agency. Right as we get started, I think those 2 guys go off the board pretty quickly.
Kylie McDaniel, ESPN MLB Insider, our guest here on 3 and Out. Kylie, appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Kylie McDaniel, our guest here on 3 and Out as the labor negotiations continue. And as you said, a lot of it's kind of the boring down in the weeds stuff of negotiating, Ben. But obviously these are things that got to get ironed out so that this game can operate smoothly, as you said, for at least 5 years moving into the future and kind of have that labor stability.
The only thing that scares me about this, Kevin, as we mentioned, 4 players, you're talking about the PA. You're talking about a PA that if we, I don't know where PAs are ranked, but I think that MLB's PA is kind of way down there. We talk about kind of getting bullied because the guys who are really affects, really aren't being represented at the negotiating table. But right now, the owners know they got a little time. But as we get closer to opening day, and there is no new CBA, they're gonna use that against them, saying, look, I know you good, Harper, and I know you good, Mookie Betts. But what about your teammates who I didn't even think about? You can't even go up to the facility. So if I was using the team's trainer and I'm a league minimum guy, it's taking everything I got to be able to keep my rehab going. So it's a lot of things to factor in. Hopefully cooler heads can prevail, aka these owners can budge a little bit. Because at the end of the day, Kevin, they are in the business of making money, not losing money. Hopefully that'll benefit the players as well.
We've got more to come here. 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Hit us up on Twitter. Love to hear from you at Pigskin Radio. Great to be here on this Tuesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. NFL draft. Obviously, a big build-up to the draft. A lot of talent in this year's NFL draft. Charlie Campbell of Walter Football going to join us, BJ, on Thursday here on the show. So looking forward to that. And he is talking up Jordan Davis of the University of Georgia, big defensive tackle. He said, quote, some league sources are extremely high on Davis, but I also know some area scouts who were not projecting him to the first round if he had entered the 2021 NFL draft, and have some concerns that he might be a one-trick pony for the NFL. The 6'6", 340-pound Davis is a mountain of a man with unique speed and athleticism. Team sources compare him to Albert Haynesworth and John Henderson. First round pick for Jordan. I know there's a lot of people that said been in that first game with Alabama in the SEC Championship saying, was that maybe the exposing moment of, is he a two-down guy? No, I'm not saying it like he's a bad player. I'm saying, is he a two-down guy versus a three-down guy at the next level, and does that move his stock a little bit? I'm not saying he's not a good player. That's not what I meant.
That's going to be his. Well, BJ, hold on now. That's what the draft is. Let me.
I understand that, but I've seen that, and not to focus the whole segment on that, but I've seen on social media.
Is that a critique when we talked about my shoulders being too round,
right?
And the fingers?
I understand what you're saying, but I always find it to be fascinating. I'm not talking about you, but when people talk about a prospect, okay, Jordan Davis just was all everything, won all the awards, was an All-American, led one of the greatest defenses ever, led one of the most dominant rush defenses in the history of the sport, was immovable, was the starting point for a defense the likes of which we maybe haven't seen in 20 years. And your first reference is going to be, but on 2 series in the SEC Championship game, maybe he looked tired. Like that's just – That's hard for me to process. When I think about George, sure, everything is.
Most weeks he was going against somebody he was better than.
Well,
not necessarily.
That's a lot of players.
Not necessarily the case in the NFL. I'm just saying.
I would imagine that most guys who go in the top 5 or 10 or 15 who are elite, dynamic athletes are probably better than the guys they're going up against, which is why they're drafted in the top half of the first round. But when I think about Jordan Davis, the good and the bad, everything. Yes, Ben, you're right. The totality of his draft profile. Like the 97th thing I think about is, there was 2 series against Alabama where he looked tired.
Well, I will say this. You could tell that Jordan Davis is one of the best to ever do it because of who they compare him to. I mean, Albert,
is that fair? You played with Albert?
I played I played with Albert, and I played against John Henderson in college and in pros. I think what happens is, though, BJ, I mean, we look at Albert Haynesworth based off what he became. When you talk about that first $100 million guy, John Henderson, you talk about a mountain of a man. John Henderson is all of 6'7". I mean, 340 pounds. But Jordan Davis is showing that, look, man, what am I at my best? Because what I had to understand about the draft process is it is our job to expose your weaknesses. And how do you talk about that? Like, you can't avoid it. A coach's job is not to go to the tape. It's like, I'm not going to go through the tape and watch everybody get dominated. I'm going to.
I'm saying is, to me, that would be like going back to Joe Burrow a couple of years ago and going, Joe, man, you balled out. But in that Auburn game, the second half, you guys just really didn't do it. And I'm like, that's the first thing we read. But in a sense,
though, this is the thing, though. If I'm talking to Jordan Davis, I'm saying, be ready to answer that question. Don't try to avoid it. Because when you think about it, what the NFL does, they take what you don't do well, and that's what they're looking to expose. So when Jordan Davis, first time he puts on pads, they're gonna say, all right, let's see how he handles it. Because football is about adjusting to your weaknesses all the time. Aaron Donald gets double and triple team all the time, and you can't tell. That's how he prepares. As you mentioned, Kevin, if I'm going up against guys I'm better than every week, I mean, I'm supposed to go out there and dominate. We'll see what happens, but I think Jordan Davis get used to being, critique a lot when it comes to the SEC championship game and not the national championship game.
Yeah, again, I wasn't pointing it out as 2 plays he was tired. I'm saying when you run a system, how effective was he in that game when Alabama ran a system that took him out of the ball game, essentially. Now, Georgia found a script for that, obviously in the national championship game. But they're going to point out what you didn't do well, because most weeks it wasn't even funny. You were going up against guys that weren't close to you talent-wise, and you were dominating. And I look at it in some cases where, BJ, we talk about this with high school kids. Yeah, you're going to have some good tape. That's because if you're a D1 guy and I'm a D1 offensive tackle, chances are you lined up a few nights against a dude who was probably 5'10", 220 pounds. Well, you're supposed to dominate that guy, And I think for Jordan Davis, he was going to dominate. I think if I'm evaluating you for a top 10 pick, I'm going straight to Alabama games, both of them. So I can look at how you did against the best you were going to see all season long.
What about Clemson? I mean, what about Florida?
I would
what
go
about
to that tape too.
Auburn? What about, I mean, yes, I understand. I definitely think it's fair to reference that. I do.
And with all due respect, Florida and Auburn were not even close to the same stratosphere of what Alabama put on the field this year.
Right, but,
so I also think Alabama tape first.
But I also think there are countless prospects where if you look at solely their tape against Alabama, you might say, well,
I'm not saying that again for everyone. I'm saying about a guy I'm going to pick in the top 10.
Right, but
how did you do against the best you saw all year? And there's two examples.
Joe Burrow's first game against Alabama, he got shut out. So if we're talking about first games against no, I'm saying in response to how we introed the segment, I've seen a lot of first references for Jordan Davis that are that, where it's Jordan Davis, the guy who got tired in the Alabama game. And I'm like, that's the first reference we have for Jordan Davis? Like, not the guy that was the starting point for maybe the best defense we've seen in a generation? Yes, I think it's absolutely fair to say, hey, Jordan, if you run into an up-tempo team, is that something that suits your skill set? Of course. And I absolutely agree you go to the tape against the best of the best first. But I also think, just for me, I've seen that a couple of times where it's Jordan Davis, the Alabama. And I'm like, was it that bad?
Well, I mean, you're acting like I'm saying you can't play. We're talking about a guy that people think is going to be picked in the first half of the first round. I mean, I think that's where you want to make sure that you're making a correct pick, because there was a time that a certain individual in the show advocated for the Atlanta Falcons to get a certain defensive tackle that also dominated in college, and aren't everybody glad they didn't do that?
But look, I think that's fair. What's my criticism of Aiden Hutchinson? Where were you against Georgia? Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair, but what I'm saying is, very rarely do I hear the other reference first. Maybe I've just been on the wrong message boards reading the wrong stories, where it's like, I look at Jordan Davis, and to me, and I'm interested to ask Charlie Campbell about this, to me, he looks like a lock top 15 pick. And I've seen some mock drafts that don't have him in the first round. And I don't understand that, because I'm looking at, and I get what you guys are saying. If it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of defensive formations are circumstance responsive. So if it's a 2-minute drill and you're trying to rush the passer, you may not have traditionally a Vita Vea or a Jordan Davis out on the field, because you want 4 pass rushers out on the field in that circumstance. But outside of maybe that limited example, I think you're talking about a guy that is the absolute focal point, especially in a 3-4, which is what I know it's kind of hybrid, but we've seen the Falcons run. He's 6'6", he's 340, he's done it for 3 years. He is unblockable. He demands, at the very least, multiple players from the opposing offense. I'm surprised he's not more of a lock of the top first half of the first round type player. And when I read reviews on him, and there is a wide array of opinions. Some people, again, don't have him in the first round. My thought is, if you're looking for an interior defensive lineman, what more can you want? And Ben, you might have an example that I don't know of, because I don't know the schemes and the history. But normally, if you're 6'6", 345, are you on the field in 2-minute defense anyway?
No, but I will say this. I mean, this is what makes the draft process so strenuous. Nothing is cut and dry. Like, all 250-something picks are a gamble. I don't care if you're going top 10 or Mr. Irrelevant. We don't know how anybody's going to pan out. You've garnered enough attention to warrant a certain draft stock. When you think about Jordan Davis, it's something Kevin said. If I am a top 10 pick, I am essentially one of the faces of the franchise before I even get there. Jordan Davis, to me, warrants the top 15 pick. But what teams do in the NFL that they don't have time, in college, man, we got to put together a game plan. We can't specifically try to, scheme one guy. They will scheme you in the league. They will be like, look, dude, we take away. I go back to Kansas City versus Buffalo. We talk about the kid, BJ, that had 4 touchdown passes, right?
Gabe Davis.
You know why? Because Stephon Diggs had 3 catches for 7 yards. So they took away their best player. If Jordan Davis, on a defense that was star-studded, you got to decide, do I take away him or you got Nakobe Dean? Or, then you got, you got a bunch of guys, or Jerron Walker and so on and so forth. On a defense in a top, if I'm going top 8, that means I'm probably not going to a defense that is probably, really good. So I'm going to be a focal point. Doesn't mean I'm not going to fit the bill. But because of the Fletcher Coxes of the world, or the Chris Jones of the world, or the Aaron Donalds of the world, you expect the guys to have double-digit sack totals.
But are those guys correct me if I'm wrong, and zero technique. Are those guys zero technique noses?
No, they're not zero. Okay, well, let's take another step. They comparing him to Henderson and Albert Hainsworth. Is he Vince Wilfork? Because that's the greatest nose I've ever seen. So either way, you can't run from the position you play and who they're going to compare you to. Vince Wilfork.
But that's what I'm getting at. I don't remember when Vince Wilfork or Terrence Cody or players who were true zero technique noses were coming out. Was there the same criticism of what are they going to do when it's when an offense is going up tempo at the end of a half? Normally, those guys aren't in those situations.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though. And Vince Wilfork will be in. Because this is what Jordan Davis got to understand. Dude, if we take you out in crunch time, what are you here for? You are here to be in the most pivotal moments. Against my junior year, both me and Vince Wilfork's junior year, they threw me a screen. No, they threw a screen, and I got spun around. And when I turned around, who was running straight down the line? That was Vince Wilfork. Scared me to death. But you take a Vince Wilfork with all those guys that had on that defense, BJ, he still stood out. Jordan Davis was the guy not named Kobe Dean on his defense. What they are saying about Jordan Davis is, can you be what you haven't been? If you're the top 8 pick, you have to do something you haven't done, meaning you can't get tired. You got to go from, like Kevin say, 2 downs to 3 downs. That's the difference. Why was Ezekiel Elliott go in the top 5? Because he's a 3-down back. Not a 2-down back that when it's 3rd and 1, you got to take him out. Guys that don't come off the field is what top 10 picks do. I'm sorry. That's how it should be. Right, wrong. That means that out of every player in the country, you are a top 10 pick, and you're a D tackle. We'll see.
And we're just getting started on draft evaluation, but Charlie Cable will join us coming up on Thursday here on 3 and Out. We got more to come. 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on this Tuesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, glad you are with us. As again, we talked draft talk, and Ben, you talk about that distinction because people say, "Oh, top 10 pick." What are teams looking for? And that's why I think you get overly in the weeds, so to speak, on top 10 picks. Like, well, what if you're only a 2-down guy? You could be the most dominating guy, but if you're not in there on third down and 5, maybe it's the most important, and we need you in there. Maybe you're a 20 to 30 pick or something like that. So how much of that do you think goes on when you look at guys like, man, this guy can really play. Why is he getting slotted maybe farther back than people think he should be?
I mean, that's a very, very fair criticism, or very, very fair feedback. BJ, something me and you were talking about in the break. Look, your job is to adjust to what you don't do well. That's what the NFL does. The difference in the good and the great is their willingness to adjust. The thing about Vince Wilfork is he didn't just play nose. He dominated nose, and when they had to move him over to play D tackle, he did that well too, because he knew that my best ability is availability. And the more you can do, he was on the field, so much so that they're not supposed to be able to tell if you're not on the field. It's almost like when I was with the Buccaneers in 2008, I got to play with Ike Hilliard, the great Ike Hilliard from the University of Florida. Ike Hilliard came in on third down. It was third and Ike. Everybody knew he was coming in to catch the rock on third down, and he'll run off the field. Why? Because at that point, he didn't have the same breakaway ability, but he had a skill set. You can't be a specialty player coming out in the draft. No, you can't do that.
And what I'm saying is I understand what you're saying, and I understand what you're saying about it being a fair criticism and something teams are going to address. What I'm saying is for a zero technique, 6'6", 345-pound tackle, that's a non-fit in terms of your role, period. To me, that would be like looking at a tight end coming out and going, well, is he going to be on the field on obvious Hail Mary situations? Well, that's not what you're bringing him in to do. Jordan Davis, and I would assume, I don't know this, y'all both know more than I do about schemes. I would guess that if you're a traditional 3-4 defense, that if it is an obvious, go, you are not in the 3-4, you are in more of a hybrid dime or nickel or quarters-based defense, so you're not in the scheme anyway. So that's why when I hear, oh, well, Jordan Davis isn't going to be able, if teams get up and go, well, every scheme change and formation change takes players off the field. There were schemes that take the best linebackers off the field because you're bringing in an extra defensive back. There are obvious passing situations where you take the best defensive tackles in the game off the field because as good as they are, they're not as good at rushing the passer directly as another player. So every 11 you have on the field is corresponsive to the circumstances and the scheme and the situation that you're facing. And I don't know that there are many zero technique tackles in the National Football League that you expect to dominate, especially if they're true zero technique, again, 6'5", 6'6", whatever, 340 pounds, that you expect them to be not only on the field, but dominating in obvious hurry-go passing situations. So I'm not saying it's not fair to criticize Jordan Davis. I absolutely think it's fair to criticize Jordan Davis. What I am saying is it feels like we're putting a whole lot of emphasis on something that's not what he does. Not only, we're not saying he can't do it, we're saying that's not what he does. Just like a tight end wouldn't be the primary target on a traditional, 65-yard Hail Mary.
Yeah.
Jordan Davis is a zero technique tackle. His job is to come in on first down, on second down, on third and short, on goal line situations, and dominate at the line of scrimmage. On 3rd and 13, I don't know that you want him in there, and I don't think that's a negative. I think that's by proxy of the position that he plays. On 3rd and 13, you want a probably hybrid tackle end coming in to play the inside to try to swing move the guard and get it and attack the passer. You're not going to have many zero techniques in on 3rd and 13 on an obvious passing down. I agree with the criticism, and I think it's fair to criticize Jordan Davis. But I just think if you're going to criticize a player, criticize them for what they do and what their expectations are going to be. And then you went through the draft. I mean, maybe in the modern NFL, zero techniques have to rush the passer now. Maybe that's becoming the new status quo in the National Football League. But through my time watching football, I haven't seen many, and maybe you have an example, I haven't seen many zero techniques who that's what they're asked to do. Zero technique, set the tone for the linebackers, dominate in goal line, dominate in short yardage.
Chris Jones is 6'6", 310 pounds. He played for the Kansas City Chiefs, right? He is built to play the nose, but what he had to realize was this.
Is he a 3-4?
Yeah, no. Well, he's a 4-3, 3-4, a defensive tackle. What I'm saying is Jordan Davis is a defensive tackle by trade. He's an interior D lineman. That's what he does. Now, zero technique, two technique, whatever. Jordan Davis is going to have to understand this. We get what you do. Can you expand on what you do? This is why I say this. BJ, just say he gets drafted by a team. Defensive coordinator wants to run that 3-4, put him at the nose, boom. They don't have a good year. They get rid of that D coordinator. They want to come in with a 4-3. He has to adjust. The reason why I say Ray Lewis is the greatest middle linebacker I've ever seen. Ray Lewis was a 4-3 linebacker. He won Defensive Player of the Year. They get a new coach. They get a new scheme. They go to 3-4. He said, I didn't like it. He embraced it. He became Defensive Player of the Year in a 3-4 defense. What I'm saying is, no longer are the days to where they pay you to do one thing. They go tell Jordan Davis, you have to be interchangeable. You are too big and mean too much in the scheme to just do one thing. Because if you could just do one thing, they can eliminate you on offense. They can get you out of the game plan. But let's run the ball. Let's think about this. Alabama the first time said, run it, throw it. Run it, throw it. That's what they was doing against him the first time. It was a different Jordan Davis the second time they played him because they said, Jordan, what? You ready? Because why would they want to do anything different to you until you prove that you can do more than that? So I do agree, BJ. Up until this point, look, this is what's going to happen. Either Jordan Davis is going to have to lose weight to be able to stay on the field, or he won't be on the field. And he won't have a long career. That is just how it goes, because the thing is this. 340 pounds is a lot of weight to move around, play in and play out. You know what teams are going to do? Run at him again, and then the next play they're going to throw at him. They're going to come at him different ways. Listen, Jordan Davis is one of the best players in the draft. Period. He proved that. That's what I had to learn. Every player in the National Football League has to adjust. Jordan Davis is not the only one. We talk about Aiden Hutchinson and all these different big-time pass rushers. If you are a pass rusher and you cannot turn that corner consistently, I can't work with you. If one guy can eliminate you, I can't work with you. So for Jordan Davis, and everybody likes Jordan Davis, look, you were on the most dominant team, on the most dominant defense all year long. That will not happen ever again. Because all I'm saying is, too, some of you said, Kevin, most people you went up against, you were better than. Before they snap the ball, they're going, good God, he's really that big. Yep. Those days are over with. So I do agree. I think the feedback is because criticism, I don't think it's criticism. The feedback is warranted. I didn't realize that when they breaking down my game, they only want to know what I don't do well. Hey, Ben, yeah, every time we see you out there catching the rock. We know you can do that. Why don't we ever see you blocking? That's a hard.
But when you're drafting a true nose, and Georgia fans may know, I don't remember Jordan Davis playing a 4-3 defensive tackle position. Do you?
No.
When you draft a zero technique nose, aren't you drafting that player for a specific role, or no? Do you have to be a hybrid every situation?
You have to be a hybrid, BJ, because you start saying to yourself, look, think about this. Matthew Stafford he is responsible for the two most prolific receiving seasons all time. One time was a guy named Megatron that, you couldn't stop him. Who'd ever thought the second guy would be a guy on the slot? That's him saying, dude, I'm used to a guy on the outside I can just throw it up to. Oh, I got the slot guy. That's a quarterback saying, I got to adjust, how I throw the football, because now I'm working in between the numbers compared to a guy who lives on the outside. Jordan Davis, listen, the great Deion Sanders says, your talent gets you in the league, right? How you adjust will decide if you stay. If Aaron Donald walked in this room, you're going to be like, man, he ain't even that big. He ain't even that tall. And he is the most dominant. He's giving away height, arm length, and size. But when you snap the ball, 99 is Freddie Krueger with a jersey on. You cannot stop him. Jordan Davis towers over Aaron Donald. And all I'm saying is, if he's going to be BJ, they'll say, do we want you to do what you did in college? Right? You come from the big bad SEC and y'all won the national championship. There are no excuses.
But what would you say he did in college? What would you say his...
Listen, my thing is he dominated to the point where
demand double teams at the line of scrimmage.
Yes, listen, not only did he demand them, you can't even tell he was getting double teamed. That's two guys going up against him. I don't believe it's hard to get consistent double teams in the National Football League because these guards are.
That's
very,
all
very
I'm
elite.
saying is I think if you're drafting Jordan Davis, maybe he's not a good fit for the Falcons. Maybe
No,
he's not.
I think
you're drafting him to do what he did in college, not to suddenly be a player that he hasn't been.
No. When I say they want you to do what you did in college, they want you to dominate. See,
Sure.
It's not so much. It's not so much. Oh, I want you. Like it's like this. Look, Ronald Acuna Jr. People didn't say, "Hey man, he can hit." They said, "No, he can play." Defensively, offensively, impact. If you Jordan Davis, BJ, if you a GM, if you look at him, you saying, "Hey man, I'm not going to pay him to sit in front of a center and just push a center back. I'm not doing what? No, I need you to make it so that center has to double team with that guard. So because what happens is value is built over time. So that's all I'm saying. Jordan Davis, look, these are good problems, young man. You're gonna go top 15. But BJ, once again, if you draft a guy in the top 8, do you expect him to come off the field or do you expect him to be an impact player?
I think it depends on what his role is.
His role is to walk out of college and walk into your facility as a starter and be an impact player. That's what you want him to do. The Fletcher Coxes of the world, the Chris Jones, Aaron Donalds. I mean, because if not, you shouldn't draft him in the top 10.
We've got more to come. Plenty of draft. We'll continue to break down as we get closer to the combine and more. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you here, 3 and Out on this Tuesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, glad you're making us a part of your day. Got a little basketball for you tonight. Coming up as soon as we're done in Savannah, you'll hear the Dogs. It's Georgia and it's Alabama, but it's on the hardwood tonight. And Alabama heavily, they are. Georgia struggling a little bit on the basketball court. And in Brunswick Waycross, a top 20 matchup, BJ, out of the Big Ten, Michigan State and Illinois, two teams you'll certainly be hearing more from as we get into February and turning the calendar to March.
Yeah, I know Ben and I both were hoping you could give us a quick preview of the Michigan State-Illinois game.
Well, it's Big Ten basketball. I project the final score will be 56-52. And I will go with the Spartans.
So basically Big 12 football and Big 10 basketball are the same thing?
Pretty much.
Yes. In various different – I would take – Tom Izzo play that kind of started that slowdown phase of basketball. I wish more leagues would get back to the up-tempo. We saw like late 90s, early 2000s kind of ACC where it was 80, 90 points a night. But we'll have some basketball for you. Georgia, Bama there in Savannah, and that's coming up at 6:05, 6:45 in Brunswick and Waycross markets. You'll hear Michigan State and Illinois, some Big Ten hoops tonight. Plenty more to get to tomorrow on the show. If you missed any portion of today's show, ESPN Coastal on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, you can get a podcasted version of the show there as well. Hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio, and we'll see you tomorrow all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network.